Hey, look at those clouds.
What do you see?
A dragon.
What? Where?
Life is Strange 2 is a... Actually, I'm not going to tell you if it's good or bad yet. You want to find out, you're going to have to watch the video! Wolf Squad, rise up! Wolf Squad, rise up! Wolf Squad, rise up! Hi, it's me again. Let's just get into the video.
Once upon a time, in a wild, wild world, there were two wolf brothers.
So, when I first had the idea of making this Life is Strange retrospective series, I didn't really know what to expect going into Life is Strange 2. My general consensus for this whole series has been that it's a franchise I was never really wowed by, and at times didn't even think was very great, but still had a sense of passion and honesty to it that always kept me coming back to it, even through all the mediocrity that I thought came with the series. But when I made that first video on the first Life is Strange game, there were a lot of things I wasn't expecting. Obviously the response it got was the very big one. The other one was all of this. I really hope you play Life is Strange 2. I kinda think you'd actually enjoy 2. I haven't even finished the video yet, but please play the second game. The franchise truly peaked at the second game. Hear me out! Life is Strange 2. It's a nice change seeing a comments section be in support of Life is Strange 2 compared to this one, as I'm very used to seeing the opposite. Honestly, what I was searching for in Life is Strange was found in Life is Strange 2 for me. I think at the beginning you said you hadn't played Life is Strange 2 yet, but if you want a game like the Walking Dead one you mentioned, where your actions affect how another character turns out and that therefore affects story outcomes, Life is Strange 2 is exactly that. Play Life is Strange 2. It's good, if a bit heavy-handed. I like 2. IMO, it's probably the best. You have to play Life is Strange 2. It's the best game. Life is Strange 2. I really liked Life is Strange 2, even though it's not flawless. Yeah, in my opinion, Life is Strange 2 is actually so much better than the first. But noticed you haven't played Life is Strange 2, which is a big mistake. Life is Strange 2, the GOAT! It's goated. I was expecting to have people agree and disagree with me on the first game. I wasn't expecting such a massive surge of people almost begging me to play the second. I don't think I have ever had so many people tell me I needed to play a game before. This didn't feel like a few friends recommending a game to me, or hearing about something from word of mouth. A good chunk of that first video's response was how, knowing the problems I had with that first game, and what I thought would have made it better, I would love its sequel, and I missed out big time on it being the only one I never played. And here we are now, Life is Strange 2. Easily my most requested video as of now by a long shot. And kind of excitedly, I mean, this is the first time I'm going into a game completely blind, you know? That kind of happened with Before the Storm, but at least with Before the Storm, I had some familiarity with that game, but Life is Strange 2, I knew next to nothing. When this game came out, I wasn't really interested in it. The first game was nothing I was super into, and Before the Storm burned any potential interest I had left. It wouldn't be until True Colors that this series really piqued my interest again. When it came to games in 2018, my attention was on much more prominent things happening. Spider-Man consumed most of my time towards the end of the year. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was finally concluding the Survivor trilogy. Spyro was finally back in the spotlight with the Reignited trilogy. There was also one other game that came out this year that was kind of a big deal. What was it called again? Oh yeah, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And even when it came to the narrative adventure genre specifically, I wasn't into Life is Strange 2. My eyes were back on The Walking Dead and everything that happened with that final season. I got sent on an emotional roller coaster when Telltale ended up collapsing in spectacular fashion after its second episode, with tons of developers getting fired and then coming out about how bad it was to work for Telltale. It was a lot. It probably wouldn't have mattered if Life is Strange 2 was the best game on the planet. I was in emotional shambles because holy shit, Clementine's story was being left unfinished. But when those developers all came back under Skybound to push on through and finish the game, playing those last 2 episodes and being hit with that gut punch of a finale that left me equal parts destroyed and finally satisfied, finally seeing a proper conclusion for one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, I clearly got a lot I want to say about The Walking Dead as a whole, and I really want to cover it for this channel. We'll save all of that for if or when I decide to do a similar series for The Walking Dead, but to get back on track, it cannot be emphasized enough how little interest I had in Life is Strange 2 as it was coming out. Even the following year in 2019, I had stuff on my radar like Resident Evil 2, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Modern Warfare 2019, even when it finally concluded in December 2019, Alien Isolation got a Switch release. God damn, I can finally play this game portably. There was really nothing Life is Strange 2 could do that would grab my attention. There's only 2 things I knew about this game going into it. One was this infamous exchange from episode 1.
You're the reason we need to build that wall.
Oh, wow. We're really not going to be subtle here, are we? Next you're going to tell me Homelander is a Republican. The other was this first game's teaser trailer. It has a really great hook right off the get-go, and this was definitely a much different tone from the previous games. This really is such a great teaser trailer. From the very start, Dontnod was letting you know this wasn't taking an easy route. They were going to take things a lot more seriously. You can feel that the very second you boot up the game. Jonathan Morali from Sid Meier's returned to score this game as well, and while the first game had more of a laid-back, dreamy tone to it, the soundtrack here sounds more mellow, more grounded, and at times more somber. Just listening to that menu theme for this game, you can already tell that this is not going to be like the other games. The soundtrack altogether is pretty great in this game. Don't think I liked it as much as Before the Storm, but it's on par with the first game. Not bad, the game hasn't really started yet, but I'm already noticing improvements. I guess the big question now is, well, did Dontnod achieve that for the rest of the game? Life is Strange 1 was a game that I obviously wasn't that impressed by. It's one I respected, that's for sure, but it didn't blow me away. And I think I've spoken about Before the Storm for a few hours too many on how much I ended up really disliking that game. And in all fairness, I knew based on what people were saying and my feelings towards the games after Before the Storm that Before the Storm was the worst the series was really going to get. But does that mean this game is simply best by process of elimination? Or is there really a hidden gem in here, like so many people have told me? Is this going to be like my other Life is Strange videos where it's only a few fascinating things that draw me to it? Or is there really a great game hiding in plain sight all these years? So let me throw in this bit towards the beginning of the video before I forget. I need to make this very clear with Life is Strange 2. If you're going to get this, don't make the same mistake I did and buy this used if you're going to get it physically. Make sure you buy a brand new copy. So I somehow did not realize until the very end of episode 4 when I played this the first time that the physical disc version of the game only contains the first 4 episodes and Captain Spirit. Episode 5 you gotta get separately. So thankfully when I did get this, I got like super lucky and this code for episode 5 was still usable, so I was able to get episode 5 at no extra cost, thankfully. But yeah, I don't think it would have mattered too much because, you know, episode 5 is relatively expensive. I think they're only like $5 an episode. But yeah, if you're gonna get this game physically in any capacity, make sure you're aware of that. If you're gonna get it used, you gotta get episode 5 separately, or if you get a brand new game, it'll come with a copy of episode 5. So just be aware of that. Don't be stupid like I was and not know that until the very last seconds like I did. But yeah, let's just get into it.
One question comes quite often on a daily basis, I could say. It's what are we doing at the moment? What are we working on? So what we can share today is the fact that we've been working since the release of the box version last year on a new Life is Strange game with the Life is Strange team, and we cannot wait to share more about this with you.
Life is Strange was a smash success for Dontnod and Square Enix. Even without Square's sudden push to make it a full-on franchise, a sequel was going to be inevitable. Pretty much the entire creative team was back. Michel Coe and Raul Babert returned to direct, Jean Lucano and Christian Devine returned as writers. Besides some new programmers coming on board, development transitioned pretty smoothly to a sequel to Life is Strange. It became clear pretty early on that the team wanted to make a new story in this universe, and it's where they went forward with making Life is Strange an anthology series instead of directly following up Max and Chloe's story.
You become to be an outcast, you become to be somehow homeless, and how people will look at Sean and Daniel will be really different of how they will used to be when they were in Seattle.
This time, the focus would be on two brothers, Sean and Daniel Diaz, who are on the move to Mexico after a tragedy forces them on the run from their home. The story would be focused on traveling, as the brothers would not be able to stay in one place for too long, and all the while, Sean would have to become this new mentor to his brother while on the road escaping. Taking care of Daniel would be a core focus, and this time, your decisions would have an impact on how Daniel acts and reacts just as much as Sean.
There is also the overall aspect of the game, the visuals, the music, the presentation, where we are keeping what we loved for the first game and making that evolve with working on better visuals and evolving the technology, but still keeping every aspect of the artistic direction, for example, of the first game.
Every aspect was worked on to improve from Life is Strange 1. There were more details placed across the game, the art direction had more work put into it, most of the presentation was focused on polishing the hell out of it. They took extra and careful time casting the roles of Sean and Daniel. Things were just as seamless, if not more so, than the first game. Life is Strange 2 was confirmed to the public by dontnod in May 2017, and it would not be until the sudden announcement of Captain Spirit that things really got rolling. We'll get to that one in a minute. Life is Strange 2 itself was confirmed that same month in June 2018, and following some other teasers was officially revealed at Gamescom 2018. The game began proper with its first episode releasing in September, followed by... Jesus, 4 months between episodes 1 and 2? Okay, no wonder I didn't hear much about this game. Life is Strange 2 had a bizarre release model. The game wasn't fully finished until December 3rd, 2019. That's over a year to wait for 5 episodes. 16 months. The first game, by comparison, took 10 months to complete. Now, whatever the reason for this was, I couldn't tell. The optimist in me would like to hope that this was a sign that dontnod was taking their time on this game and kept a healthy working environment throughout Life is Strange 2's development, but to look ahead a little bit, this is the only time something like this happened with dontnod. After this, their games would get full releases, and their only episodic games after this, Tell Me Why and Lost Records, fully finished within a month or two. I'm sure part of that is shifting markets. Life is Strange 2 came out at the tail end of the industry, moving on from episodic release formats. And honestly, I think this might not be entirely their fault, but I'm sure Telltale collapsing probably didn't instill a lot of confidence in this model anymore. But it's still a really weird way to release the game, especially since it's not that much longer than the first game. If there was a reason, I couldn't seem to find it. Life is Strange 2 doesn't have a lot of developer diaries or interviews compared to the first game, let alone an entire commentary like the first game had. That was a little bit disappointing, but I guess at the same time, I don't really know how much they could really talk about when it came to development. It was the first game's process, but with some more budget and experience. The game released to positive reviews and won some awards, although it was not nearly on the same level as Life is Strange 1. Sales have never been disclosed for this game, so it's hard to really tell if it was a success or a flop, but it certainly didn't do the same numbers as the first game or even before the storm. The numbers Life is Strange 2 sold has been contentious at best, and I think this is part of why I seem to see some people talk about how underrated this entry is. It was going to be hard for dontnod to put out another smash hit like the first Life is Strange. And Life is Strange 2 certainly received its fair share of criticism around the time, some of it from being a more overtly political game, some of it from the marketing and release decisions surrounding it, but probably the biggest one, it didn't have Max and Chloe. That seemed to be enough for people to write it off. But in the years since, Life is Strange 2 has developed a cult following of sorts. You know, if the people telling me to play it wasn't enough indication. Back then, as it was coming out, people who disliked the game didn't say much that wasn't already said about the first game. Now, from my perspective at least, it seems the reaction to this game is either indifference, especially compared to the other games in the series, or people putting it on a pedestal as this hidden gem that was sorely underappreciated at the time it came out. And now it's time to see what the fuss is about. I wrote this off when it came out, partially because of the first game and what that did for me, but also because as I got into, I was just playing a lot more games I was interested in that wasn't this. So, yeah, I don't really know what to expect. This game could be overhyped, but I'm open-minded. Maybe people are onto something with how much they praise Life is Strange 2. I guess there's only one way to find out.
You will pay for what you did, Mantroid. I swear. Hello?
Hello? Hey, boss. Can I have a pizza, please?
Okay. Who is this?
Can I have a pizza, please?
We're just watching the game.
Boss, please, I have a cancer, boss.
Chris, who the hell are you talking to?
Nobody, Dad.
Can I have a pizza, please?
I really went back and forth about whether or not Captain Spirit should get its own section. This was released for free in June 2018 and more or less served as a demo for what to expect in Life is Strange 2. You play as a young boy named Chris, and the entire episode is just basically screwing around on a Saturday morning like most kids do. Playing with your toys, playing outside, hanging out with your drunken father, Leon Kennedy.
Do I look okay? No. I tripped. Can't even watch one goddamn game.
Yeah, I didn't expect to hear Nick Apostolius again, but here we are. I gotta be straight with you guys, I really didn't like this. The entire episode is Chris doing all of these awesome activities throughout the day, done on the backdrop of unraveling and finding out that Chris's mom died in an accident a few years ago, and his dad has not moved on from it, dealing with a bad drinking problem. If you really look through all of your surroundings, this takes like an hour and a half at most to complete, but because so much of that hour and a half is fluff, almost nothing but Chris screwing around, it doesn't have any staying power. I want to sympathize with what Chris is clearly dealing with right now, and to the game's credit, after Before the Storm handled some of its topics, especially that fucking drugging scene, it's refreshing to go back to dontnod really taking this stuff seriously. I was really wondering if they were going to take an extreme when it came to Chris's dad Charles and his addiction problems. They never blatantly crossed that line, but there was a teeny bit of tension I had playing it there. Most of my tension came from wanting the gameplay to end because, good god, this episode meanders big time. I know gameplay is not the main focus for these games, but Captain Spirit really pushed my patience more than a few times. You have to constantly go back and forth between inside the house, outside the house, inside the garage, outside the garage, to get all of these tasks done. It's a little bit of a puzzle trying to solve some of these activities in unison, but Christ, these puzzles really suck. There's one point where you have to unlock Charles's locker in the garage, and it has a 4-digit key lock. You have to really infer from all of your surroundings to guess that this is 2005 based on one of the framed pictures in the living room, but hey, at least there's something in this case. Unlocking the phone was a bitch to get through. I scoured through every single thing in this episode, trying to find any indication of what this code might be. I thought maybe if I completed one activity, I'd get the code that way. Or maybe it was really well hidden somewhere. Come to find out, this solution is nowhere to be found in the game itself, or if it was, I couldn't find it. And guys, I really scoured the internet trying to figure out if there was an organic way to discover this in gameplay, and there isn't as far as I can tell. You gotta brute force this one. And what's the code solution, you ask? 42983294. What the hell? Who on earth is going to figure that out naturally? Yeah, it spells out hot dog and connects thematically, but what person is going to take that blind leap of faith when most of the solutions are already in the game world itself? You can skip this. It's free, so if you really want to check it out, you're not missing much. But to jump the gun a little bit here, this really doesn't affect Life is Strange 2's narrative and choices as much as it says it does. And as far as free goes too, dontnod made episode 1 of this game free in 2020, similar to the first game. You really do not have to play this if you want an idea of what Life is Strange 2 is like. Hell, this Captain Spirit demo isn't even on Switch, so it's not like you can carry those choices forward to that version of the game. And real quick, for the record, I'm covering the PS4 version of this game throughout this video. There's no remasters to talk about moving forward, and I don't think I need to buy a copy of this game on Switch to tell you it's probably a worse experience than every other console like the last two games were. I'm not gonna lie, this did have me a little bit worried going into Life is Strange 2 when I played Captain Spirit. What's here isn't bad, and I like the ideas it presents, but it's such a boring slog to play. And you could make the argument like, oh, it's just a demo, it's not supposed to be the full game, it's just supposed to give you a taste of what to expect from the full game. And yeah, I guess in that sense, it is completely harmless. But if this was supposed to get me excited to play Life is Strange 2, and if it was gonna play anything like this, if the narrative was gonna be anything like this, I was very concerned. But let me put it this way, if you're on the fence about this game in any capacity, don't play this episode. It's a nice side thing for those who are already really into this series, but you don't need to play it to get an idea of what to expect from Life is Strange 2. Try episode 1 for free to get a direct sense of if you'll like the game or not.
Do you think there are werewolves for real?
Dude, we are the wolves.
Episode 1 starts with a police officer getting their shit kicked in by powers unfathomable to the human conscious. Oh, dude, we're starting this game and it's already saying ACAB? This is gonna be awesome. Right off the bat, something immediately feels different about Life is Strange 2 compared to its predecessors. The dialogue in the last two games could get infamously cringe, but here? Things are played surprisingly straight.
Let me take a look at the situation. Hey Jen, you going to the party tonight? Dude, we talked about this. Could you have any less game?
I'm no good at this. Would be awesome to see you there. What? I could have texted that.
It's a good start. She'll text back, you'll see.
I don't even know if I want to go tonight.
Oh, please. It's gonna be fun. You hate every party.
Oh, because they're all the same. Too many people, too fucking loud, everybody's wasted.
I mean, there's no shortage of some cringe. Sometimes characters say some dated lingo like dank. Oh my god, when does this game take place? Like, when was dank even a thing? Like, wasn't that like 10? Wait, that was 10 years ago. Hold on. Was that actually from 2015? Hold on. Motherfucker, they did their homework this time! This hit me like whiplash. Holy shit, dude. Realistic teenage dialogue? In a Life is Strange game?
What happens if we go to different colleges? Or you get sick of me? Whatever.
You heard of the internet? No way distance can tear us apart. We're freaking fighters.
Yeah, you're right. Best freaking fighters forever.
And this isn't the only area either. Most of this episode's dialogue is really good. I gotta give them props. dontnod really listened to the feedback from the first game here. This dialogue's good enough that it kind of made me realize in retrospect that the first game's cringe wasn't the entire issue, it was just how insanely overbearing it got. Life is Strange 2 really dials it back a ton, and I think it's really beneficial for this game. The game opens up with one of our lead characters, Sean Diaz, a 16-year-old kid living with his dad Esteban and his 9-year-old brother, Daniel. He has a walk home with his best friend Lyra conversing about a party going on that night and how Sean is working up the courage to ask out a girl from school.
You heard back from Jen yet?
No. I'm sure she'll reply at some point.
Oh man, the voice acting is so much better this time too. It wasn't bad in the first game, to be fair, but before the storms got really bad. Not to say that there aren't moments where the dialogue is, let's just say the usual for Life is Strange.
And of course, we must not forget the booze.
But I think most of this is offset by how straight the performances are this time around. There's nothing particularly awful here, but there's nothing that's going to blow your mind. The only standouts I really noticed were Sean and Daniel, but we'll get to them later. Charles was a standout, if nothing else because Leon Kennedy's apparently got influence in the series now, and a certain character and voice actor returning from Before the Storm that I'll talk about later, but for no other reason other than seeing them reappear. Bro, what is happening? Like, I'm starting a Life is Strange video off positively? You know what? I kind of respect it. This game's got my attention. Sean makes his way home and prepares for the party. He becomes the deciding vote between who in the family gets the last chocolate bar, and we get the first real gameplay segment. There's no time mechanics, so we got exactly what you expect from this kind of game. You can inspect your surroundings to get Sean's inner monologues on how he feels, and our collecting comes in the form of a few new things. Sean can find stickers and trinkets across the game that you can decorate his backpack with, and like Max with her photos and Chloe with her graffiti, Sean can draw. By sitting down to key locations, he can analyze the area around him and draw it. It's super simple. All you gotta do is look up, hold the action button, look down, spin the left control stick in circles before you need to look up for more details, repeat until the whole picture is drawn. It's neat, and it does a pretty good job of building up the type of character Sean is. You can even find these drawings in his journal here, and oh man. Oh man, dude, I really do not like this user interface. I guess thematically it fits, but this looks way too cluttered and at times a bit confusing. Super nitpicky, I know, but I can't help it. Navigating these menus are never fun. One nice thing this drawing collectible does for the game is bring proper attention to this game's breathing spaces, or moments of calm as I guess they're officially called. These are here in Life is Strange 1. Before the Storm kinda lost the sauce on this even though that they existed. Life is Strange 2 puts that back at the forefront, allowing players a moment to breathe, take in their surroundings, and relax. Sean can roam around the house and get his stuff together for the party. He has a follow-up conversation with Daniel, who's hiding his Halloween costume. And going into the basement, he has a really nice conversation with his father.
Okay, have fun, but not too much. I won't. Promise. Bye. Love ya. I love you too, hijo.
Yeah, this guy's gonna die, isn't he? Sean video calls with Lila about the party and blows off Daniel showing off his costume, which leads to him going outside and causing a confrontation with their neighbor Brett. And here you're confronted with the first major choice of the game. Either confront Daniel about what he did, or get Brett to back off. Regardless of the choice, things escalate when Sean and Brett get into a full-on fight, and... okay, bear with me, a lot happens here. Sean knocks out Brett bad on the ground, a cop happens to pull up, He gets out and starts waving his gun around, forcing Sean and Daniel to the ground and threatening them. Esteban comes out trying to defuse the situation. The cop escalates tensions higher, which results in Esteban getting shot and killed, and something happening with Daniel causing a shockwave that kills the cop and knocks out Sean. Sean wakes up to the entire block being partially destroyed, finds his dad's corpse, and in a panic from hearing sirens, grabs Daniel and runs away. The two start hiking south from Seattle, and Life is Strange 2 begins proper. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here, and yeah, that is kind of my first issue with this story. Now, I understand the purpose here was to show how quickly a person's life can go south, especially with the social commentary this game has going on. What with Sean and Daniel being Mexican and Brett getting, pretty on the nose racist.
Then go back to your own country.
That being said, I think all this happens way too fast. The first Life is Strange did an alright job with setting up its premise by having its entire first segment be around Max's nightmare vision, her starting to test her time powers, culminating in saving who would eventually become the secondary protagonist. But here, we have similar emotional beats, but they all play out within a few minutes. It gets right to the point in thrusting Sean and Daniel on their journey together, but no build-up whatsoever. It just happens, and then bam, the game truly begins. I'd say this is a good problem to have, not wasting time and going straight to the real meat of the plot, but in execution, this happens way too quickly. Everything the game was building up gets thrown away and changes. I think a nice middle ground would be for the party Sean's attending to happen, and then after that is when this happens. Give us a little more time to introduce Sean and eventually Daniel. I wanted to see more of what Sean and Daniel's lives were like before this incident to really give me a sense of what they lost and left behind besides their dad and Lila. Sean brings Daniel along under the guise of them going on a trip without their dad, not knowing fully what happened, let alone not wanting to tell Daniel the truth about what happened to their dad yet. It's here that we're introduced to what is probably the most involved game mechanic of Life is Strange 2. It's not Max's time powers or Chloe's backtalk. This time, with Sean, it's Daniel himself. Let me say this up front. How much you end up liking Life is Strange 2 is entirely determinant on whether or not you like Daniel. Unlike a character such as Chloe, who really only had gameplay implications in the story, Life is Strange 2 is all about Sean and his direct relationship with Daniel. All of your interactions and choices play a role in their dynamic, mostly in ways I don't want to detail too much until we discuss those choices in more specific detail, but this first forest area gives you a ton of space to figure out how this will end up working across the game. Sean can interact with most things, but about half of the interactable elements you can jointly react to with Daniel. This will open up new dialogue and conversations the two have across the entire game. Even those breathing spaces allow Daniel to join in and have a back and forth with Sean. During this segment, the two of them play hide and seek, and this explains a mechanic where pressing a shoulder button allows you to lock onto Daniel to find him where he is and keep track of him, or alternatively using it to call out for him and find him. Even though this mechanic doesn't amount to much, and I honestly forgot it was a thing for most of this game, but still, it's about learning the game's mechanics involving your brother. By the riverside where the two set up camp, you can partake in a handful of activities with Daniel as well. Some of them are supplementary, but others will play a role in developing Daniel and Sean as the game progresses. Think something like the back and forth Joel and Ellie had in the first Last of Us game, but on a much more involved scale. There's not much else to this part of the game besides the art direction looking decent. I know I harped on Life is Strange 1 enough times in this area, but Life is Strange 2 is definitely an improvement over this. It's still got that impressionistic style to the world itself, and the characters are generally more detailed than they were in the first game. But okay, the facial expressions are an improvement, I will praise the game for that, but I don't think they come quite as close as the improvements before the Storm's expressions and movements had. This has to be a thing specific to however dontnod was making games around this time, because there are definitely more instances where expressions can feel stilted compared to before the Storm. While that game felt like it had more expansive options for how characters emoted, Life is Strange 2 feels like they're stuck to the same tools they had when they made the first game, and it does lead to some moments where characters in this game can look a little dead-eyed again. It is an improvement over 1, no doubt about that, and it definitely isn't nearly as distracting, but it made me appreciate those aspects of Before the Storm a little more. After this, Sean and Daniel make their way to a gas station. There's quite a bit going on here as far as what you can do, because along with your usual exploring and talking to other characters, there are things you can do that affect how Daniel interacts with everything. You can have an awkward conversation with the family sharing a meal here, even try to ask them for food, or you can have Daniel go up to them and beg for food. You can go into the station and look for stuff to buy, including food and drinks, a claw machine with toys, clothes, camping equipment, but surprisingly, you can also have the option of stealing as well. My first playthrough I didn't do this and opted to simply buy what I could, In later playthroughs, I chose to steal, and the store owner can react differently to you based on how you play too. It's one of the first instances of the game acknowledging that your choices are going to be put on notice much more often than the last games. You can also come across a free puppy the station is trying to home. Once you've gotten your stuff and sit down to hash out plans, one of the gas station owners comes up and harasses Sean and Daniel, accusing them of stealing, and you're presented with... Wait, hold on. There's 3 options to pick for this one? 3? Damn, we're breaking some new ground here, aren't we? So in what is both a benefit and detriment to Life is Strange 2, the game generally has more options at its disposal when it comes to your decision making. And looking back, I wish I talked more about this for the last 2 games, but I don't know, look how long those videos are, I was bound to forget a few things. But let's talk about this real quick. I think one of the smaller issues with decision making in these games is how binary it can get. In the first 2 games, there were a lot of dialogue options at certain parts of the game where you could only say 2 things. That's not abnormal for a game like this, but it rarely allows for dynamic interactions. Especially when most of those binary options never really affected how a character reacts, or in some cases, characters basically saying the exact same thing. One example, Max's conversation with Chloe at the lighthouse. Not only does she only have 2 dialogue options to pick each time she talks and that's it, but they never pivoted the conversation in an even slightly different direction. It played out the same way no matter what you picked. Life is Strange 2 admittedly has this same problem at times too, like how a later conversation you have with this character Brody that you meet at the gas station only gives you 2 response options. But in 2's case, this issue is only enunciated because 2 gives you more options at your disposal with how to respond to characters in situations. And that is so frustrating. I love that there's more freedom in how to approach some conversations and decisions this time, but it makes those moments where things are more limited stick out even more. This isn't the biggest deal in the world, and I would argue Life is Strange 2 generally does a better job than the last games at these dialogue options, pivoting things in at least a slightly different direction at times. But man, imagine how much more dynamic things would be if you always had this level of decision making on hand. I know it's gotta be really annoying to always bring up a Telltale comparison, but as I've said before, Telltale's a gold standard for a reason. The Walking Dead always gave you at least 3 options that most of the time altered how characters perceived and interacted with you. Episode 2 of that game, you can choose to side with Kenny, side with Lily, try to play the middleman, make yourself seem like the one in charge, or pick silence altogether. I know Life is Strange 2 probably doesn't want to copy that word for word, but look, they're already taking notes from Clementine here. Would it have been too derivative for them to do something similar? Sure, but there really was a missed opportunity to go even further with how Life is Strange 2 handles these decisions. Anywho, regardless of your actions here, Sean will end up getting kidnapped by this guy who recognizes him from the Seattle incident, and hey, listen to that. He's racist.
If he's lucky, he won't end up like his criminal big brother.
Just let me go. Please.
You're the reason we need to build that wall.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of political stuff going on with this game.
Seems dangerous to be out here all alone. But maybe you're the ones who need to be watched.
Huh?
Yeah, I got that game. I know he's racist. Okay, a little bit on the nose here, but anyways, like I was saying, the politics in this game can get a
You
little...
fucking little spick! You and your brother are going to jail for the rest of your lives!
The hell with you.
Okay, game, I get it. I get it. You know what, let's talk about the politics later. Daniel has another incident that causes the store to get damaged and knock the owner out. You can choose to flee altogether or steal camping gear on the way out. Daniel will take the puppy from before no matter what and call her Mushroom, and the 2 run into Brody, a nomad journalist camping out in his car. He doesn't think twice about helping them and getting them out of there, and it's here we get one of my favorite parts of episode 1. Sean starts talking to him and gets to know him. That's it.
Long, boring story short, I come from a family with money, but no soul. I took off after school and never looked back.
It's simple, but wow. I really love talking with Brody here. Getting to learn more about him, his profession, what he did before, what he's up to now, learning details about his life. I never thought something so simplistic would be so engaging and refreshing for this series thus far. And it's not like Before the Storm where all I'm learning are just random factoids about Rachel. No, we learn what Brody does for a living, how he came from a rich family but wanted to move away from them, and from a note we get at the end of the game, find out he's visiting his mom who's going through cancer treatment. When they make a pit stop, Brody tells Sean he knows about what happened in Seattle and gives him a chance to let his emotions loose about what happened. And he's surprisingly really supportive of Sean about this and his decision. He doesn't really question the why of it, just that if this is going to happen, he can help him in his own way. It just so happens that way lines up directly with Sean's plan to now go to Puerto Lobos, a town in Mexico where Sean and Daniel's father owns some land. This is the polar opposite of how unapproachable characters could be at times in the previous games. And while I brought this up quite a bit in these videos, I will bring it up again. Stuff like this makes the world around Sean and Daniel feel alive. It doesn't revolve entirely around them. Brody is super helpful to them in this moment, but in this moment only. He gives them supplies and a night at a motel before he goes on his way and wishes them luck. It leaves a great first impression, seeing as how Brody is essentially the first character we meet after the Seattle incident. My only complaint really is, because of the structure of the story, this is the only time we see him in person here. I would have really liked seeing this character more, so while I'm glad for the impression he does make, it does kind of suck you don't get to see him again after this. But after that, Sean and Daniel get ready to turn in for the night. Sean prepares to get rid of his phone, but not before you can decide to have a call with Lila. As the episode ends, Daniel finds out about their father's death through a newscast, and if it wasn't obvious before, we finally get a real introduction to the sci-fi element this time around. Daniel is telekinetic. And while it takes some talking down, Sean eventually gets Daniel to relax. The two embrace, Daniel being fully aware of the situation they're in now, and your last decision in the episode is either to promise Daniel not to lie to him anymore, or emphasize that he can try but can't promise. Damn. I mean, damn. Episode 1 of Life is Strange 2 isn't without its faults. Some of the more intense moments happen way too rapidly. There's too much downtime at certain parts of the game, especially in the forest. The pacing is not always that great. Things are either not happening at all, or they're happening all at once. And that does cause the emotional beats that should have had staying power not have as much as I think dontnod had hoped for. But man, I have to give dontnod credit, all things considered. From the very first episode, it's clear how attentive they were to feedback from the first game. The dialogue is much more straight and nuanced, the characters are more likable, and the approach to decision making, while definitely not amazing, is still an improvement over the first game. I don't really have too much else to say. That was actually really solid. Alright, you got my attention. Let's see if it can maintain that momentum.
You don't have to use your power if you don't want to.
Sometimes I can help, and how do I know when to use it?
You don't. You can only trust your guts. Hello.
Episode 2 begins with a shot of Sean and Daniel's dog Mushroom playing in the snow in the wilderness. Yeah, this dog is gonna die, isn't she? Sean, now aware of Daniel's power, has been helping him train to hone and improve his skill, while also trying to maintain secrecy with it. They found an abandoned home secluded here and made it their place for the time being, as Daniel has gotten sick and isn't getting any better. There's basic stuff you can interact with. You can have Daniel mess around a bit with his powers more, like playing fetch with Mushroom, or popping him in the face with a snowball. Going back inside, you go to cook some ravioli for everyone, and Sean eventually decides they need to go back to their estranged grandparents for help. After playing some dice that night, with Daniel pretty clearly cheating using his powers, the two wake up the next morning preparing to leave. But not before Sean lets Mushroom go outside. On her own. Yeah, this dog is definitely dead. Daniel eventually goes outside to look for her, with Sean following close behind, and Sean follows a blood trail to find a really pissed off Daniel as he looks over Mushroom's corpse in front of a cougar.
It killed her! She was my friend!
Calm down, okay? Listen.
Leave me alone! No!
Damn it! You can't do this to me, game! Oh, I guess I listened to complaints about the first game's choices, huh? Not enough meaning and emotional weight to most of them? Well, damn it, they listened! Now you gotta pick between letting Daniel have his revenge or stepping in and having your dead dog get dragged off and eaten! What's that? Life is Strange 1 wasn't emotional for you? Well, fuck you, man! Your dad is dead, and now your dog is too! It has been such a long time since a choice in a game like this has had me in agony over which one to pick. I had no idea what to choose here, because there doesn't really seem to be a wrong answer. On one hand, I chose to intervene in my first playthrough because as effed as this situation was, I still had that lingering thought in the back of my head that was going, how is this going to affect Daniel moving forward? Because I could let him do his thing, but it wouldn't change anything. Sean even tells him that. I wanted to confront a version of Daniel that would learn getting revenge like this is never satisfying. It would only hurt him in the long run. You know, Last of Us 2 type shit, except it's actually good.
I let you live, and you wasted it.
On the other hand, though, this fucker killed our dog. Someone's gotta pay for the shit we've been thrown into. Might as well be this cat that crosses a line. This is something I sorely missed while playing the previous games, especially when it came to Life is Strange 1. While it did have its fair share of real moral dilemmas, there were still decisions that were very obviously skewed for you to pick it one way. Like episode 4 of the first game, where you could warn Victoria about Nathan, of course most people are going to try doing that. The vast majority of players are not going to intentionally let her get potentially killed. The first game needed more moments like this, where neither option feels wrong. You could argue stepping in to stop Daniel is the morally correct choice, but you also can't blame players for being upset enough to let Daniel take his anger out. Whereas in the first game, if you don't warn Victoria with that initial choice, you are potentially condemning her to her death. Yes, I know she's in a dark room if you warn her and vice versa, but you get my point. Oh, what a tone setter, dude. I think the only real issue is that while I did have an emotional response to this in the moment, it didn't really stick with me long term like I thought it was going to, and I'll explain why when we get towards the end of this episode. Sean and Daniel make their way to Beaver Creek, Oregon, and meet their grandparents, Claire and Steven. They take the two of them in and have a very serious sit down with Sean while Daniel recovers regarding what happened in Seattle. After taking some time to mull it over, Steven and Claire decide to let them stay on very conditional terms to ensure that they don't get caught while Sean figures out what their plan is. I really like the nuance they add to this, with the grandparents being conflicted about wanting to help them at all, knowing the incident in Seattle, but after seeing how broken Sean is over what happened and getting to meet Daniel for the first time, they decide they want to try. It would be easy to make a quip that they should just hash things out with the police like I talked about in the last two games, but we gotta think about this situationally. The first game had Max and Chloe discover a borderline serial killer with accomplices and did nothing with that, regardless of how the two of them, especially Chloe, felt about the cops. And this was made extra stupid in the following episode when they prove, if they went to the cops, something would have been done about this properly. At least in context to the game itself. Before the storm had Chloe call them, and it worked because she was stuck in a room with a man displaying psychopathic tendencies. Here though, we're talking about a couple of Mexican kids on the run in the United States. Do you really think there's going to be room for understanding nuance their situation, especially when one of them claims to have, I don't know, telekinesis? And is not thinking about what would even happen to Daniel if the right people higher up discovered he has powers. There are very few situations where the police are going to side with some immigrants in a case that involves a dead police officer. If you live in the United States, you know this. Even without considering the current climate in the United States, you could still say this exact same thing at the time this game came out. I think it makes sense that Claire and Steven, despite some reservations, wouldn't want to go this route when Sean makes them pretty aware of what it's going to look like if two Mexicans are arrested in a case involving a dead cop. And I'm glad Dontnod really made sure to do their homework this time when it came to handling this topic. Is it always handled with grace? No, not always. There are times where things can get overbearingly heavy-handed, and we'll be talking more about some of that later, but it is a vast improvement to how they portrayed similar social issues in the last game. And because I know there is going to be someone in the video comments that is going to say this. Why am I talking about politics when I'm talking about a video game here? Let me make this very clear. This is a story about two Mexican kids on the run from a crime they didn't commit. Life is Strange 2 is political. Hell, Life is Strange as a whole is political. It's just that 2 really sticks out in this area. I'm not going to apologize for discussing political topics this game brings up and has very clear feelings about. But alright, back on track here. Sean and Daniel stay at their grandparents for several days, getting to know them much better and helping out with errands around the house. They have to deal with some house rules, especially in regards to not going into their mom's old room. Episode 1 planted some seeds for this, but this is where we really start to learn that, for reasons we don't fully know just yet, Sean and Daniel's mother left the family. Sean is obviously still really bitter about this, while Daniel, not knowing who his mom is, wants to find out more. When Sean presses Claire about this, She shuts it down and suggests the two go outside for some fresh air. This is where things finally intersect with Captain Spirit, when Daniel uses his power to stop Chris from falling off of his treehouse. They have a bit of conversation with him, as well as Charles when he rushes out to get Chris, and Sean has a more serious conversation about staying low, where he can either decide to tell Daniel to hide his powers no matter what, or tell him that while he did the right thing, he needs to be extremely careful about how he uses them. Of course, Daniel is 9 years old, so that doesn't stop him from going over to Chris's house a few days later to play with him, his powers in full view, with Sean justifiably being a little pissed, even when it's discovered that it's Chris who's convinced has powers and not Daniel. Charles comes back and fulfills that promise to take Chris to get a Christmas tree and invites the two boys along. They head into town, and Sean can choose to have Daniel either keep hiding the truth of his powers or be completely honest with Chris about them. Sean has a look around, listens to a girl named Cassie playing some music and befriends her, and eventually has to find a present to give to Daniel for Christmas. This may be nitpicky, but one area of this game I thought was kind of weak was how it handles money. Your resources are obviously limited in Life is Strange 2. You start the game with a determinate amount of cash depending on what you tell Esteban, but from there in episode 1, the only way you're getting more money or goods is through stealing them. Now, for reasons I don't want to delve into just yet, stealing does affect your relationship with Daniel, and that was something that was on my mind while I was playing this episode. I found out later on it only affects episode 1, but as I was playing this is what was on my mind. So every chance I got my first run, I didn't steal. This was the only time I ended up having to steal something. I guess that's on me for giving some money to Cassidy earlier, but it kinda sucks that the game punishes you this much if you go this route. Yeah, it adds to the moral weight of your decisions, sure, but at the end of episode 1, I still had $30. In episode 2, I only had 4. That makes sense given time has passed, but I still think it leans towards this mechanic affecting you a little too negatively. My second run, I only had enough to buy a gift because I both stole some cash in episode 1 and knew ahead of time to preserve my resources. This isn't a massive deal, but it is a small one that did bother me a little bit. After finding a gift, the two drive back home with Charles and Chris, and it's here where Charles starts to open up about his struggles in life, losing his wife and being a single parent to Chris. Your conversation choices here affect how much he opens up to Sean about this, and okay, on the surface, I really love that they added this complexity to him. Granted, that was kind of there in Captain Spirit, but it wasn't there enough to really leave any meaningful impact, which makes it all the more impressive that Life is Strange 2 is able to accomplish that much better in a shorter amount of time. Even if you didn't play Captain Spirit, you get a very clear sense that something is wrong with Charles. And this conversation proves that he's fully aware of his problems and that he's trying to do the best he can. For most characters, Life is Strange 2 has very clear-cut good and bad characters, with some exceptions, like that one dude who went off at the tree lot and isn't subtle about it either.
Getting tired of these parasites, if you know what I mean.
Life is Strange 2 does a shockingly good job at adding a lot of complexity to these characters, because even when we know they're wrong, we understand why they're like that. And it's on a level much deeper than the first game had. That being said, if Charles only had a drinking problem, I'd leave it at that. But dontnod went the extra mile to showcase in Captain Spirit that Charles is an abusive father. They try to make you sympathize with someone who apparently beats his kid and has no qualms saying this to his face.
Every time I look at you, every time you talk,
Stop it.
I see your face. Why? And if it wasn't for you, she would have never taken the car that day. Never.
I can't be alone in thinking that's a little fucked up, right? It's true that I understand why Charles is that way, but I think this is part of why dontnod gets scrutiny for how they handle subject matter like this. Because while their intentions are clearly good, it can at times feel like they're going down a checklist on social and political issues they want to discuss, and some of them are discussed in a way that at best is incredibly shallow. I'm not against them trying to get people to understand why Charles is the way he is. But let's not try to frame this like he's some misunderstood person like episode 2 tries to do. He gets drunk, shit talks his kid, and the game very directly says he abuses him. Why else are they going to add that detail about him getting bruised in Captain Spirit? You can't add those details here and then in episode 2 frame it like he's really trying his best to be a good dad to his son. Having him acknowledge he needs help isn't gonna undo the trauma his child will develop from what he did. This is a very complex issue, and they needed more time to spend on it. It reminds me a lot of how they approached the topic of euthanasia in the first game. This is a really weird way to go about tackling a problem like alcohol addiction. I think if they left out that Charles hurts his son physically, emotionally when he's drunk, I would be fine with what they're doing here, showing that Chris is being forced to become more independent. And hey, maybe that's what they were going for, but it falls flat when the game wants me to empathize with him and I still have that lingering thought about how he treats his son. Yes, game, I have empathy for people struggling with an addiction, not with people who abuse their child. It shouldn't matter what the reasoning is, he's abusing his child. I can excuse some of this in the first game when dontnod was still trying to figure out how they should approach handling sensitive topics in their games, and I still applaud them for trying here too. I know there's no ill intent here, otherwise dontnod wouldn't be so serious when handling this and we get another Victoria drugging incident. But at a certain point, you've got to recognize that you've had more than enough time to do your homework and how to approach subject matter like this, doubly so if you already received feedback and criticism for how you handled it in your previous game. Because if you repeat this mistake when talking about serious themes over and over, it gets to a point where you start to wonder if addressing these topics like this is going to do more harm than good, even with their good intentions. And this is why moments like that reason we need to build a wall scene sorely stick out. They're too on the nose in a game that wants to handle things with more nuance and sincerity this time. The worst part though is that because all of this is isolated to episode 2, it never gets the proper time needed to explore these complications with Chris and Charles. It actually makes the Captain Spirit demo worse because why add this extra complexity to two characters that aren't going to play a role in the story after this? Makes it feel like much more of a waste of resources to spend this much time on characters that pretty much only show up once regardless of what the intention was. But alright, after that, Sean and Daniel get back home and after enough pestering from Daniel, the two finally decide to look in Karen's locked room. They get caught by Claire and Steven and a fight breaks out between all of them. It gets pretty real. Claire is upset about the boys disrespecting her house and her rules. Sean and especially Daniel feel betrayed that they hid all of this, in particular with a note they find where their mom sent a letter asking Claire and Steven to keep the boys safe, and Steven straight up walking out in the middle of this.
I can't hear that.
Damn, that made it almost feel too real. But then things escalate. A cabinet falls onto Steven and you're confronted with having Daniel either hide his powers and risk Steven getting hurt, or use his powers to save Steven. Regardless of the outcome, the police show up, knowing the brothers have been hiding out there, and Claire and Steven, after embracing them, send the two away while they distract the cops. From here, a few different things can happen depending on Daniel's relationship with Chris. In my first playthrough, Chris jumps out to stop a car driving to the brothers thinking he can use telekinetics, which leads to him getting decked on the ground after the car hits him. The brothers run away devastated, not knowing if Chris is alive or not, and the episode ends with them freight hopping. Okay, let's get into this. So, first up, this outcome is very determined on how you handle taking care of Daniel up to this point in the game. You might hear me say this a lot throughout this review, but I'm going to try holding my tongue here as much as I can because there's a ton to unpack when it comes to choices and how they affect the game this time. Enough that Daniel is going to need his own dedicated section of this video to discuss how involved things can get. All you need to know for now is that Daniel will pay attention to what you say and what you do. What happens here with Chris depends entirely on how confident Daniel is with his power, and if Sean has been telling him to hide it or not. At the end of this episode, when looking through the choices, I noticed that Chris can also not get hit, and in one case even help the brothers escape and not get involved at all. In my first playthrough, I told Daniel to keep hiding his powers, so in my second, I told Daniel to tell Chris the truth. I thought this would at least give me the option where Chris helps them escape, but Chris still runs out and gets hit. Obviously, I was like, wait, what the fuck? I told him to tell Chris the truth. Only to remember and find out after the fact that there was a possible outcome where Daniel still continues to lie about this. As someone who was casually playing the game, I thought, wow, the game really accounted for how much I was telling Daniel to hide things from everybody around him this time, and that was a really cool feeling, but then the reviewer in me who was trying to comprehensively look for and analyze everything I could in this game was like, oh my god, dude, am I gonna have to play this a third or fourth time just so I can see everything? Life is Strange 2 does a much better job at tracking your dialogue choices this time around. In my second playthrough, I was playing Sean as more of an asshole, and that reflected in how Daniel talked to me and everybody around him.
Ow!
Shh. What did Claire say?
Oops. You're right. Sorry.
Shh. What did Claire say?
Who cares what the old bat said?
This is great stuff. This is what I'm talking about. I love little moments like this where it really feels like the game is actually taking this stuff into account while you're playing. On the other hand, I really wish they were a little more direct about this. Yeah, I know, I just complained about the game being too direct, but I think there's a middle ground here that Life is Strange 2 does struggle to balance at times. Because we've got two extremes here. One is how on the nose and direct the game gets with its themes and motifs. The other requires me to read a guide on what exactly I need to do across 2 episodes just so Chris doesn't get hit by a car. It's really just unbalanced is the best way I can describe it. Like, there's just 2 extremes going on here, and I think Life is Strange 2, as I'm going to get into a lot when I'm talking about these episodes, it does struggle with that a lot. When it does find the balance, it is very good, but when it doesn't, it's either too direct, not direct enough, too subtle, not subtle enough, and I do think that that does hamper the experience a little bit when playing Life is Strange 2. I love that the game has moments like this that are out of your control and are decided by how you handle things in the game leading up to it, but a little more clarity on how my choices are affecting Daniel would go a long way. Second up, this exposes a smaller issue the game has. Now, because of how specific your choices have to get for some core decisions, I had to experiment for a long time to finally get a different result for Chris. And kudos to Life is Strange 2 here. Instead of playing the game a third time, the game allows you to not only roll back to specific chapters and start replaying the game from that point, you can save that data over one of the game's 5 save files. This is a huge time saver if you want to go back and find other decisions you may have missed. This run, which I'm going to try to refer as like my third run, experimental run, just experimenting with the game in general, whatever you want to call it. This was how I got Chris to open up more about his dad being an alcoholic and getting Charles to open up and say that he would try to get better. After enough experimenting, I never got that ending with Chris being safe, but I did manage to get Daniel to tell Chris the truth and got the even less likely option of Chris helping the brothers instead. Here's the thing though, I was glad I finally got this option to happen, but that was after replaying these sections multiple times. That's because Life is Strange 2 doesn't allow you to fully skip cutscenes on repeated playthroughs. If you have default settings, you can't do this at all, but if you select the alternate option, it gets really selective about what you can and can't skip. I played through these same cutscenes so many times that I just started scrolling on my phone every single time they started playing again. Funny enough, it's how I noticed that there's some options that will actually take silence into account as a dialogue option if you don't pick something quick enough. Life is Strange 2 has some of those, although it isn't clear about when this can or can't happen. But finding out that sometimes silence is a valid option by complete accident in this game, because of the monotony I dealt with trying to get other decisions to happen, isn't exactly a compliment. There really needed to be an option to fully skip cutscenes in this game. There's no problem with making them unskippable on a brand new playthrough, but when you're backtracking a bunch to get new choices or find collectibles, especially if it's from a completed save file, it gets more tiring than you can imagine. Third up, this has the same problem as that initial opening and really puts a spotlight in the pacing of this game. Life is Strange 2 really struggles between the quiet and the loud moments. Just like episode 1, there's extensive periods of calm where not much is happening, and then all of a sudden, several things start happening at once, sometimes fast enough that I don't really know what to think. Again, I know this is pretty much the point. Sean and Daniel have to stay on their toes at any given moment, but it leads to a narrative that can feel really inconsistent. You can have an entire hour-long stretch of Sean quietly looking at his surroundings, engaging in casual chats with people, and then within a 5-minute period, several events happen back to back all at once. You could argue that maybe this can heighten the tragedy of each of these moments as Sean and Daniel don't have the time they need to properly dwell on this, but that's also its own problem. Life is Strange 2 takes things more seriously than the first game, and I truly applaud it for that. But at times, like Before the Storm, it can feel like an overcorrection from the original game. Remember that emotional beat the first game had with Kate on the roof and how that tragedy could affect things moving forward regardless of Kate's decision there? dontnod really liked that moment. They liked it so much that this is exactly how every emotional beat in these quick moments plays out. The very second I saw Esteban, Mushroom, and even Chris, I knew for a fact something bad was going to happen to them. And in fairness, with Chris, this is determinant on your choices. But the game has this pattern now of an emotional beat where Sean and Daniel start to really care about something, it gets stripped from them one way or another in a fast, tense moment, and they have to move on from it without giving much thought. And it ironically affects these characters negatively because while they have a ton of complexity, the most the series has offered so far, I preemptively kept choosing not to get super invested in them because, well, what's the point? The game has an emotional pattern. I know something bad is going to happen involving them. I kept expecting this as I played Life is Strange 2, and every single time, I was right. I really want to get attached to some of these characters that Sean and Daniel meet, especially because some of them are legitimately really good characters. but because they spend so little time with them in each episode, it was hard for me to get attached. This road trip structure has its pros and cons, and the pros at least outweigh the cons in this game's case. It's just unfortunate that it comes at the cost of your relationship with other characters not really going anywhere and not really developing the way they would have if there was a more consistent setting, or even a group of characters along with Sean and Daniel in their journey. But yeah, after this, not much else happens in episode 2. Sean gives Daniel his Christmas present early, and they ride the train to wherever their next destination is. Aside from these blemishes, I will say, episode 2 is at least pretty solid. I do like some of the dialogue that Sean and Daniel have back and forth. That first choice in the episode still really gets to me, and I think Claire and Steven are some of the best side characters in the game so far. Again, so far so good. Like I said, it's not perfect, but I am legitimately enjoying my time with this game, and it's not like Before the Storm where a second playthrough made it worse for me. It's actually in some ways getting a little better when I replay it. Man, it sure would suck if there was an episode coming up that I really disliked, don't you guys think?
I know it sucks, but you have to grow up now.
I'm not a kid anymore.
This is so stupid! It's bullshit!
Episode 3 begins with a flashback sequence of Sean and Daniel back home with the brothers getting into a fight after Daniel steals something from his room, with Sean proceeding to have the proper reaction to getting interrupted while listening to On Melancholy Hill.
Get your ass over here now!
Cut to the present, and Sean and Daniel have found themselves at a camp. So that girl Cassidy and her friend Finn that you can meet at the Christmas tree lot, turns out they're freight hoppers with a large group of people who have now taken the brothers under their wing. Thanks to them, they've now managed to find a haven in this encampment with other people working on a farm in Humboldt, California, out here making that pack, am I right? During the beginning of the episode, you grow accustomed to the rest of the crew here, including Penny, Hannah, Jacob, Anders, and Ingrid. After doing some chores for the morning, you can find Daniel hanging out with Finn throwing some knives around, and you can choose whether or not to tell Daniel off for clearly using his powers to cheat here. And
after that workout, I need some more fucking Java.
I won't lie to you guys, this was almost where the game started to lose me. Up to this point, Life is Strange 2 had taken itself very straight and serious, and this episode definitely does some of that too, but some of that overbearing tone that plagued the first game starts to come back to a certain degree here.
You saw them? When? How?
Because Vision, Sean, they watching us now.
Well, I just wanted to.
What? Feel at night?
How you miss all those insects? How the fuck? The swarm is coming.
This isn't a fucking school bus. We're late. Are you really shit-talking me, Cheech?
He's Agent 420, and he has a license to cook.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
You're always looking for an excuse.
Ooh, it's 420. Hey, Sean, let's talk. Ow, my arm hurts.
Wow, wow. How about a keg offering for your family, or some hookers or cocaine?
Screw the hookers. Bring on the Choco Crisp.
Now look, it's not as extreme as the first game, I'll give it that much, but I really did not like what this episode started going for. The dialogue gets a little angsty with these new characters, and the so-called villains here are pretty one-note. A few characters here get really sidelines like Ingrid and Anders, to the point where I wonder why they were included here besides inflating the cast. Jacob's barely here too, but we'll get to him later. Cassidy and Finn are pretty much the only really interesting ones here, and that's mainly for one reason: they're romance options for this episode. Depending on your dialogue choices, you can pursue one or the other, or even neither of them at all if you play certain choices right. I guess there's something for everyone here: the vanilla run, the good Christian boy run, or the woke run. Pick your choice, it's still more options than Before the Storm. I know exactly what this episode is trying to go for. They wanted to have Sean and Daniel get some conflict in the middle of the story that begins to wedge the two apart. Sean is spending more time with these people than his brother, while Daniel is getting more snappy with his brother and beginning to indulge in more irresponsible things, like that knife throwing earlier where he abuses his powers to keep hitting bullseyes. But here's the thing. Life is Strange 2 is at its strongest when it's focused on the brothers and the characters are there to help their relationship build. Like I've said, it's personally not what I necessarily look for, and I would probably enjoy the narrative when it's more stationary, But this is what the game is doing this time. Episode 3 comes in, and that gets put to a screeching halt so that we can briefly go back to something more stationary. Meaning, there's a heavier focus on your relationship with everyone around you. But the problem is that by the time I've gotten to this episode, I've got a grasp for what Life is Strange 2's setup is. Every single episode is going to be something drastically different in terms of setting and characters. So what reason do I have to start getting attached with these characters when I know that one way or another, they will not show up again for the rest of the game? To get a little ahead of myself, Jacob is the only character who ends up having more significance later, probably why they spent almost no time with him in this episode. Everyone else, including Finn and Cassidy, barely show up again for the rest of the game. Instead of having characters that supplement Sean and Daniel's story in some way, like Brody in episode 1 or their grandparents in episode 2, Episode 3 introduces a whole cast of characters they expect us to start knowing and caring about like they're going to stick with us. But you can't exactly do that to the degree you want when the player preemptively expects that they're not going to be in the next episode and even be surprised when the opposite happens. This way of handling characters in Life is Strange 1 worked because it was a stationary narrative in a stationary setting. The quality of those relationships with characters certainly varied, but it worked because you never expected that the next episode was going to radically change things up. I cared about Dana's side story with her failed pregnancy and her boyfriend Rose because I had an expectation I would be able to talk to her at least once every single episode. Life is Strange 2 has these two main characters, but it has no supplementary cast that consistently stays with them. I can't care about Anders and Ingrid's side story about being Swedish immigrants traveling the country like the game wants me to, when I can't even have a direct conversation with them the way I could so many characters in the first game. It brings Life is Strange 2's pace down to a miserable crawl in a game that already has some really serious pacing problems. This episode's got intense gameplay segments too, like cutting up bundles of weed. No, hit wrong button! Yeah, this really fucking sucked. Holy shit, this gets dragged out forever. I really want to know who thought this part was good. It's not like it really affects anything later on. I even did that in my second run. I literally sat there and did nothing waiting for the game to get a move on. This did not need to be this long, let alone have this bad minigame it hopes you'll play. After returning to the camp, Sean takes Daniel to practice with his powers a bit more. Daniel expresses more jealousy of Sean spending so much time with the rest of the group and not him, and Sean starts to show a little bit himself when it comes to Finn and Daniel. The two get into a heated argument which leads to Daniel showing off and storing away, with Sean knowing full well he ain't the alpha he probably thinks he is. I don't think this conflict is unrealistic, seeing how Sean's a teenager and Daniel is quite literally a little kid, but I don't know, I wish this was built up a little bit better. It feels a little out of left field. At least if you're playing Sean with a higher moral compass. If you choose to be an asshole like I did in my second run, this whole sequence is totally believable. This leads to all the characters coming together at a campfire, and the conversation eventually pivots to everyone trauma dumping their worst memories. And hey, I'll give the game this, I do at least like the dialogue they end up having in this part of the episode. Probably the best part of the episode if I'm being real. Really makes the bad dialogue stick out even more than it already did, but I'll take what I can get. The next morning opens up with this montage, I guess? This was bizarre even by Life is Strange standards. I can't even play the song here because it's definitely copywritten, but yeah, like you guys started the episode off with the villain saying like, oh, this is not a summer camp, we don't fuck around here, and we have a montage that like treats it like it's a summer camp. What is the tone here? This whole episode is presented as this teen drama thing. Again, not much different from the first game, but when the game has had such a dramatically different tone from the very beginning, and they suddenly go back to basics they had with the first game, it's honestly disappointing and, to be totally blunt, not very good. Life is Strange 1 already has the advantage here because for as much as I really didn't enjoy how over the top that game could get with its genre and its presentation, that's still the presentation it's going for. Episode 3 badly sticks out because every episode before and after this takes itself dramatically seriously, and don't misinterpret me. This episode does have its dramatic moments, but instead of being in service of a narrative that is about two brothers on the run from a very serious crime they didn't commit, it's suddenly in service of an episode focused on building a teenage drama that Sean and Daniel are placed in the middle of. It doesn't feel that fitting to the overall structure of Life is Strange 2. Doubly so when all of this only happens in this episode in isolation, and we don't see anyone here again. I know I'm repeating myself, but like, I gotta make that point clear. No one comes back from this episode except Jacob. Yes, I know that's the risk they took with making 2 a road trip story, but that's still a sacrifice I'm going to be critical of if this is the way they're going to suddenly start handling their characters. I like that this game is a bit more realistic with how these relationships develop. I said that in my first video. People are gonna come and go in your lives, and sometimes there will be a reason, sometimes there won't be. That's just life. It's strange. And I do appreciate Dontnod took that direction this time with this game instead. But I hate that it had to come at the cost of not letting us care about these characters for more than a single episode. There is nothing wrong with having these characters come and go, but at least give us enough time with them to make us care beyond one episode. Especially when an episode like this has characters that I genuinely do not care to ever see again. Anyways, once payday rolls around, Daniel gets caught snooping around the farm owner Meryl's house and gets his henchman Big Joe, yes, that's his name, to teach Daniel a lesson while he takes away the staff's pay and fires Sean. Daniel is forced to use his powers in front of everyone.
Who did that?
I did. My fault. Look!
So trusted you. I thought I could too.
The two finally confide about his powers to new people. But Finn suddenly has a brilliant idea to get Daniel to use his powers to break into Meryl's safe. This idea gets shut down pretty quickly, and everyone goes back to camp to get wasted one last time before Sean and Daniel leave. Depending on who you were flirty with in this episode, Sean will also hook up with either Cassidy or Finn. My first playthrough I went with Cassidy, if nothing else because the game clearly nudges you towards choosing this, especially if the choices shown at the end of the episode are any indication. After they hook up, they find out that Finn and Daniel are long gone and quickly surmise they're going to break into the safe. Sean and Cassidy make their way to Big Joe's trucks and hatch a plan to steal one and catch up. What happened here was honestly one of the most annoying parts of the game, and it made me truly realize the real problem I had earlier when I was forced to steal a yo-yo in episode 2. So I've talked about how a core design philosophy with Life is Strange 1 was looking through all of your surroundings and picking out any details you could, and in some cases even being rewarded for this. Quality may have varied, but that was the idea. You wanted to look over all of your surroundings and it would supplement and enhance the gameplay. The biggest example in that was all the stuff involving Kate. You look around everything in Kate's room, you can learn more details about her life, and that can potentially help you when you're on the roof with her. Life is Strange 2 continues this same philosophy. Looking over your surroundings the same way will grant you supplementary material that is totally optional, or may even help you in certain cases like one I'll get into with episode 4. But Life is Strange 2 likes to have its cake and eat it too, because sometimes looking through all of your surroundings can punish you. This ended up happening in episode 2 as I donated money to Cassidy, saw the rest of my options, and realized there was truly nothing else I was allowed to do besides steal the yo-yo. But somehow, they make it worse in this episode. So, searching the area, I decide I want to try to get into the car stealthily, right? I found the screwdriver, use it on the car door, can't do that. Use it on the tires of one truck so Joe can't follow me just in case. I then proceeded to scour this area for ages, using the screwdriver to break into other parts, find a set of keys that went nowhere, find more weapons if I wanted to break anything, and by this point, I was already on thin ice as one of my actions had woken Joe up. I was lost enough that I tried looking for a guide online to figure out how the hell to get into the truck quietly, and I discovered I could climb onto the backside and use the screwdriver to pry open the back window. So I go to do that, and...
Shit. Broken.
Shit. So after I scour my surroundings again, I finally realized I had nowhere else to go, and the game essentially forced me to break into the car. I went back and forth about how I was going to discuss this part because, yeah, some of this is on me. I should have realized the keys went to the lockbox and I didn't need to break it. I should have realized I can climb the bed of the truck. Points against me for having a skill issue in a goddamn Life is Strange game. That being said, it's a little bullshit how restrictive some of the decision making in this game can get. When I was making my choices for this part, it was in service of actively trying to get into the car stealthily. So yeah, it pissed me off a little that I was acting in that line of thinking and essentially got punished for it. Part of the appeal of these games is looking over all of your surroundings and it can clue you into new stuff. new dialogue, new options for choices, etc. It feels pretty counterintuitive when I'm in that mindset and 1 or 2 decisions is enough to lock me into making a choice I wasn't even trying to make in the first place. It leans way too much towards punishing players for looking through their surroundings, and it's one of my least favorite parts about Life is Strange 2. I understand they really want to get players thinking about their decision making, and that's the intention with sequences like this, but if you're going to do that, you can't have a sequence of events and a sequence of choices that are going to lock you or punish you for how you're playing. It's okay to have your choices in prior episodes be a reason for that too. In a weird way, Life is Strange 2 does a better job of handling the butterfly effect in the first game in that sense, ironically enough. But you cannot have this both ways because there are 2 different design philosophies happening here. One of these game design philosophies is like the previous and even following Life is Strange games, where looking through your surroundings and acting on them is enough to progress the story and clue you into new dialogue, cutscenes, even choices. And the other one severely narrows your options for dialogue, cutscenes, and choices. And look, if Life is Strange 2 is trying to go for that, that's totally fine, but it has to commit to that. It can't have sections where it's going to give you all this wiggle room that's irrelevant to your choices, and then other times it's going to give you all of these sections where it narrows down your decision making like this. It's got to commit to one or the other, because if you have both of these clashing all the time, it's going to confuse players. Because ultimately, that's what happened here. I was playing this section more like I was playing the rest of the Life is Strange games, but that's clearly not what Life is Strange 2 wanted me to do in this moment. And that's why I can't have its cake and eat it too here. It's gotta commit to one of them. I know this is extremely nitpicky even by my standards, even when this usually doesn't amount to too much, because big shock, this doesn't amount to too much in Life is Strange 2. In my second run, this time I knew I could use a screwdriver on the window, so I went straight for that. Didn't even care to look over any of my other options. If there were other options, I didn't know if they existed. Just went straight for that, had Daniel unlock the door, and went on my way. Yeah, I went with Finn's plan in my second run. Big shock, it doesn't really affect too much regardless of if you choose to go with him or not. Even when I went back and experimented with my first run, I intentionally had Big Joe follow me back to the house. All this adds extra is that he's the one that shoots Finn instead. But again, if there were any other choices I could have made in this moment that were unique, I sure as hell wasn't going to find out if the game was going to punish me for searching for them. If you really want players to think about their decisions, give them the space to fully consider all of them. The end of the episode can go a couple different ways depending on if you help break into the safe or try and stop Finn and Daniel. Meryl will catch everyone and threaten them for trying to steal his money, and in my first playthrough, I told Daniel not to use his powers to help, which resulted in Finn getting shot and murdered on the spot. In my second, when I worked to break into the safe, I had Daniel use his powers, which results in Finn still being alive, but Daniel getting injured. Regardless of the outcome, Daniel will start to lose control of his powers and basically explode in a fit of rage. This ends up knocking everyone else out. The game ends with the carnage that remains. They start playing a really on-the-nose song about not wanting to hurt someone intentionally, like, there's no subtlety with it. And we get this panning shot of Sean, now with a shard of glass lodged in his left eye, once again reminding us that Life is Strange 2 really loves to escalate things way too quickly and make Sean and Daniel's life a living hell in order to get us to try and cry again. Oh, this episode was bad, dude. And it actually got worse on repeat runs. This episode, I mean it, guys, this episode almost lost me for Life is Strange 2. Besides that pretty obnoxious blemish of the game taking control away from you the more you explore, this episode reeks of what I really didn't like about the last 2 games. It starts upping the over-the-top melodrama in a game that had been really grounded up to this point, and I guess I'm glad it's only isolated to this episode, but with everything being isolated to only this episode, it's once again difficult for me to get really attached to anything outside of Sean and Daniel. I want to enjoy some of the depth they give a couple of these characters, but because we don't get to see them again after this, I don't really feel anything towards them by the end. Other characters are so one-note and underutilized that I wonder what their purpose being here is at all. All it would take is for the game to have at least a few of the cast moving between episodes to truly care. And to the game's credit, they do some of this after this episode, but this episode enunciates the problems surrounding the game by having these detailed, 3-dimensional characters in Sean and Daniel, surrounded by characters that are now starting to get one-dimensional. In trying to slow things down for Sean and Daniel and their relationship, it brings everything to a sudden stop so abruptly that I'm wondering what the purpose of anything I just played was. Can we move on to episode 4 already?
I know it might sound cheesy, but we have to be good role models for him. He's a Diaz, right?
Daniel?
Let me ask you. Have you seen a little girl around here? Short, black hair, 7 years old?
2 months have passed since the incident at the farm. Daniel is missing, and Sean has been taken into custody. And immediately, I like that episode 4 does a much better job of portraying disability this time. Sean has lost his left eye, and he's been recovering before he stands trial for the Seattle incident, as well as everything else the police have tracked on him since he left. And while there are things that happen to remind you that Sean is now half-blinded, Life is Strange 2 does it much more tastefully. It's less about getting dramatically wrapped up in it like the first game did with that alternate timeline. Sean has accepted that this is something he now has to live with, and that's how the game runs with it. He befriends a nurse at the hospital that helps him and even empathizes with what he's dealing with, but he never talks down to Sean about it. People act very matter-of-fact about this, and Sean tries to not let it hinder him. We've definitely come a long way from how overly tragic it was handled in the first game. It's another obstacle Sean has to overcome, but it's just that, an obstacle he learns to overcome. And one that he has to adapt to pretty quickly as he manages to piece together after getting his journal back that Jacob from the last episode has taken Daniel to his hometown in Haven Point, Nevada. You have a handful of options for how to escape here. I chose to do it quietly in my first run, which Sean manages to do pretty effortlessly, almost amusingly so. In my second run, okay, so this ties back to what happened with Chris earlier in the game. So this time, I tried to find a more violent way out of the hospital, like hitting the guard and escaping that way, but then I remembered there was a way to get that nurse, Joey, to help you out. I kinda screwed up this first time and ended up hurting him instead to escape, so I backtracked. And let me tell you, at first, I could not figure out for the life of me why I didn't get this option at all. I tried picking different options for my first run, I tried looking up some guides or posts about what to do. Nothing seemed clear on how to even get this outcome. And this is a problem for repeat playthroughs, because like with how Chris's fate can turn out at the end of episode 2, it's not exactly clear what you have to do in order to get these outcomes in the first place. Even in my first run, when I played Sean as a goody two-shoes and not an asshole like my second, I never got this option at all. What exactly am I doing wrong? Part of what makes these games replayable is being able to see what exactly happens if you pick different options, but Life is Strange 2 at times goes way overboard with how specific you need to play it in order to get these outcomes. And okay, on one hand, I can applaud this, because as far as I can tell, this means Life is Strange 2 really pays attention to what you pick as far as dialogue. In both of my runs, I told Daniel that Mushroom was in heaven with Esteban in episode 2, and to jump a little ahead a bit, towards the end of this episode in my second run, Daniel actually points that out when Sean is telling him to have faith in himself instead.
Don't listen to her religious bullshit. You need to have faith in yourself, not in her.
But you said heaven and God existed. Why are you lying?
What the hell? That's so cool! I can't believe the game actually remembered that. I love little moments like that in a video game, as small and arbitrary as it sounds. But while I definitely think this is an improvement, dontnod definitely went a little too far with it. Because if I have to read or watch a step-by-step guide to this degree just to get one different choice to play out, then what's the point of repeat playthroughs? It was through, once again, experimenting and looking more stuff up that I finally figured out how to get this option. You want to know how you get the decision to have Joey help you? As far as I can tell, you have to pick every single positive dialogue option in the opening, select these specific dialogue options when you ask him to help you, but most importantly, Sean has to pass both vision exams. The first one isn't an issue, you're just moving around the camera, but the depth perception one, holy hell, this was annoying. This took me a good 10 minutes of restarting and resetting my checkpoint just to finally get this. Just so you can have Sean hit Joey in the head to make it look like he was ambushed, and proceed to never see him again because, God forbid, Life is Strange 2 doesn't already have an overabundance of characters it completely forgets about. You shouldn't make prime decisions like this border on being Easter eggs to get. It's no wonder you get to an end of an episode and see how few people got these outcomes. There's nothing that clearly indicates that they even exist by the time you finish an episode. The only other thing of note in this part is that you can talk to Finn if he survived in the last episode, and you can either forgive him, or do what I did in my scumbag Sean playthrough, tell him to piss off.
Finn, you're just selfish. You act like you care, but you got your own family busted, and fucked up mine.
Sean drives his way up to Haven Point, goes through a few pit stops along the way, including, This one, where a couple of guys come out of nowhere to harass him, and...
You speak Spanish, Pedro? Hablas español. So, Professor, how do you say, I'm a dirty thief? All I want to do is learn Espanol. Might be our official language someday, right? How do you say, this is not my country?
Okay, game, I got the memo. This part can involve Sean either breaking down, getting harassed, or choosing to fight back, but honestly, I don't think I want to analyze this part too much on the choice front. Okay, let's talk a little more about the politics directly in this game. So I'll be honest with you guys, part of the reason that this video took so long is because I was constantly struggling with how I was going to be talking about the politics of this game, because big shock, Life is Strange 2 is political. It's easily the most political game in the series. And here's the thing. I agree with the politics that are on full display in Life is Strange 2. Some games should or need to be political, despite what gamers on the internet might try to tell you otherwise. And in context to Life is Strange 2, I think it's a necessity. It has a certain level of empathy for immigrants that people are sorely lacking right now, and I'd honestly recommend playing the game if for no other reason than it at least attempts to make you empathize with what it might be like being an immigrant in the United States. Part of what made that bit in episode 1 all those years ago so infamous was how over the top it was. But you take one look at what's happening in the United States right now, this isn't over the top anymore. This is the reality we're living in right now. I am not an immigrant. I don't know and never will know what the regular struggle is like for someone to come into a country that supposedly has a future for them, and this is how people treat you. So for a long time, I was trying to figure out why I still felt a certain way about how this game touches on these politics, because the politics themselves in Life is Strange aren't the problem. Like, is it heavy-handed as hell? Like, yeah, 100%, and I can't blame people for being a little off-put because of this, because this isn't really the tone that Life is Strange 2 goes for. If this had a tone more in line with the first game, it might have worked in context, but since 2 plays things a lot more straight, these over-the-top moments stick out a lot more. But hey, the intention is still good. The game even starting that conversation in the first place probably means it succeeded, right? Which, of course, begs the question, does this have any bearing on the story moving forward? Nope. Not really. It doesn't really matter if Sean breaks down from the bullying or tries to fight back. It barely plays a role in Sean's development. His goal here is still to get the hell out of there and find Daniel. He never brings up this moment again when he reflects on the hardships he has to deal with from being a child of an immigrant family. It doesn't advance the story, it doesn't advance the characters, it doesn't advance anything. And this was when I realized where my problem with the politics was. It isn't the politics themselves, or even entirely how they're presented, it's how at certain points, there's nothing here that's in service to Life is Strange 2's larger narrative. You could cut out this part of the game entirely and it would affect nothing. I think this runs the risk of worsening or dulling the message the game is trying to send, because instead of meaningfully weaving this into the overarching narrative in some fashion, it can come across as if Life is Strange 2 pauses at certain moments to be a PSA. I don't disagree at all with what the game is trying to say. If I did, I probably wouldn't even be making a video like this about it in the first place. I simply find it frustrating that we have a moment here that directly correlates to the game's themes and motifs, and forgets about it quicker than it likes to forget about its side characters. It's already one thing to not give some of the other parts of the game the time and respect they need and deserve, and make it feel like it's being talked about to cross off a checklist, like how it handled Charles's alcohol addiction and Chris's abuse. It's another when you do that same thing to what essentially is the entire reason your game's narrative exists. It's admittedly a fine line to balance out. You focus on the politics too much, you risk coming across as preachy. Don't focus on them enough, and they're almost non-existent. I have so much respect for dontnod for choosing to tackle a story like this when they did in 2018, and for it to be so disturbingly ahead of its time in certain narrative aspects should be applauded. For the most part, as I've been saying, this game refreshingly takes its subjects and topics extremely seriously, and after the bullshit that happened in Before the Storm, it's very welcome that we're back to this. But your politics should be what enhances your story and helps give it meaning. In a lot of areas, I think Life is Strange 2 does that very well, but when it screws this up, it really screws it up. Sean makes his way to the church township of Haven Point and discovers that Daniel has pretty much been brainwashed into thinking he's some divine being sent by God by the church's leader, Lisbeth. After they reunite, Sean tries and fails to convince Daniel to come with him and leave what's pretty obviously a cult, but he promptly gets his shit kicked in and gets kicked out. Sean angrily slams against the gates, desperate to get Daniel out of there.
Sean?
I'm sorry, who the hell are you?
Karen?
Wait, Karen?
You won't get him back like this.
Sean and Daniel's mom? Where the hell did she come from? Okay, well, with nowhere else to go, Sean reluctantly goes off with Karen to a nearby motel. Now, the game has been building up to this moment. Sean and Daniel's mother left after Daniel was born for reasons we don't fully know about yet. Sean hates her, her parents have totally disowned her. Life is Strange 2 is a bit more reserved about it, but they really build up to this, where the boys eventually meet their mom again and get answers for why she left them. The following part in the motel is where we finally get those answers, and...
Why did you bail on us?
I wasn't meant to be a wife or a mother. I thought I was supposed to. I tried to pretend for many years, but I wasn't happy, and the urge to leave just became unbearable. I had no other choice.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. She's really telling you nothing here. Like, they were really building up like Karen did something like horrifically wrong, but no, she just left. And she's just throwing big words to make it seem like it's more than it is, and it really isn't. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to sound like I'm diminishing something like this, because a parent leaving a child can be a very traumatic thing. I guess I was just expecting whatever Karen did to be like really, really horrific. Like, she did something really, really awful. I mean, I guess saying it out loud now, that is probably the purpose, but if that's the case, then why did we build this up so much in the past episodes? There is some nuance to their conversation about it, but A, you've seen these plot threads play out before. Life is Strange 2 doesn't really break any new ground here. And B, they're still rather vague about why Karen left. They sure do use a lot of big words and sentences that boil down to nothing, because despite how much Karen and Sean are finally talking about this, it really doesn't tell us anything new. Kind of related, jumping ahead again, something I found a little funny is in my second run, I told Karen off and barely let her speak her piece to Sean, but later in the episode, she still tells Daniel that Sean tried giving her a second chance.
It's what I've been trying to tell your brother. And I'm so glad he listened.
I know it can probably be interpreted as her trying to say anything she can to get Daniel back. I just thought that was amusing. Like, lady, what are you talking about? Sean didn't even let you finish a single train of thought. Oh, here's a fun fact. Listen closely to Karen's voice in this game.
Well, if he doesn't find us, we'll find him.
You don't know anything. It was an accident. That's what this world is about. Accidents, injustice, pain.
I wasn't good at making plans. Which is what most of modern life is about, right? They have their own past, too. That's why people come here, from all over the country. For their own reasons. Not perfect, but it works.
Does that voice sound familiar? That's probably because it should. That's Jolene Anderson. That's fucking Ada Wong.
Find a way out, Leon. Before it's too late. Then we'll talk. Do yourself a favor. Stop asking questions and get the hell out of here. You don't understand. The situation's worse than I thought. You want to help? We have to get to the nest.
Nest?
Umbrella's lab, right beneath us. Net let it slip. That's where the virus samples are. You up for this?
You know what? Respect, my man. I mean, my woman. We all gotta start somewhere. Pretty wild that this series is building up an ensemble that is also part of Resident Evil, don't you think? I mean, they're basically the same game, right? I don't know. Dude, next you're gonna tell me that Chris was responsible for what happens in True Colors. I guess all things considered, what happens with Karen doesn't really matter right now. Sean's got help to get Daniel back in the form of his mother, and in the form of Jacob, who they meet up with later. Sean and Jacob surmise a plan to break out Daniel as well as Jacob's sister Sarah, who's suffering from a pretty severe illness that isn't getting treated thanks to Lisbeth. They mount out an entire plan that's honestly pretty hilarious. They so effortlessly walk onto the property and break into Lisbeth's house. Even going to other people on the church property doesn't do much. There, they explore the house, find out what Daniel's been up to, they find notes from Karen that Lisbeth had been hiding, discover that Lisbeth had previously been kicked out of a big church, and even that she's trying to adopt Daniel under the table. Yeesh. They find files on Jacob's sister and learn that she has pneumonia. Sean also snoops a bit and finds Jacob's file.
Conversion therapy? Do they... wanted to cure you from... being...
Pretty much.
I always showed more interest in boys than girls.
Damn, okay, that's an escalation. Didn't think gay conversion therapy was on the list of things Life is Strange wanted to talk about. But they also don't spend the time that a topic like this probably deserves. Guess it's only another thing on the checklist of problematic stuff we have to mention to remind the audience, hey, this exists and happens. Really couldn't help yourselves, huh? But okay, one of the reverends is on his way to the house and Sean has to hide. I tried playing around with a few of the hiding spots in my first run, but... Wait, is that the consequences of my actions? I get easily caught if I don't do something in time? Sean also gets aggressively pounced on and brought to Lisbeth? Except this doesn't do much since this guy still comes back to the church even if he doesn't catch you. Look, I'm not saying these parts of the game are super bad, like, I've talked about why I liked this kind of stuff in The Walking Dead. It'd be hypocritical of me to say this stuff's bad. It's just a little disappointing is all. The only difference you really get if you manage to successfully hide is you get to see what Karen's distraction was for getting the Reverend out of there.
Your mom is hardcore, Sean.
Oh. Oh. Okay. Guess Karen's living up to her namesake, huh? This conversation in the church is all about getting Daniel to turn on her, and here's a pleasant surprise. If you explored your surroundings before in her house, you can use all of that against her and more easily convince Daniel to come with you. But that doesn't matter too much, as regardless of your actions, Daniel eventually leaves the cult, and the episode ends with the brothers escaping with their mom. Okay, I guess I gotta stop complaining about this. At this point, I shouldn't expect things to play out too differently. I know what I'm getting into with a Life is Strange game by now, but man, I wish they took this further. Like, if Sean used the evidence he collected against Lisbeth, Daniel would be more receptive to you in the next episode. But if you don't, then maybe Daniel is a bit more snappy or even hostile in the next episode. Cause yeah, it does suck a little bit that this game brings those options up for you like it'll help your case with Daniel, but things move forward in the story the exact same way no matter what you pick. This game is already overly detailed about your dialogue affecting key decisions. Why does it feel like it randomly stops here? I know I'm making this complaint a lot, and I want to emphasize I have nothing wrong with wanting to keep the narrative on track. I'm just saying it would have been so cool and interesting if the game leaned into something like this. It's inconsistent, and that's a word I'm throwing around quite a bit, but that's really the best way I can describe a lot of these moments in Life is Strange 2. Like, this really goes back to what I talked about in that section in episode 3 and in episode 2. There's just too many extremes swinging back and forth when it comes to your decision making. Either it's not going to affect too much, or it's going to be so detailed and involved that not even a guide can confidently tell you how to get those decisions. Balance, balance, balance. That's what's missing in Life is Strange 2's gameplay design. And what really makes this a little frustrating for me is that the times where 2 does have that balance, like the game's great. Like what happens with Lisbeth here. This is a perfect example here. Lisbeth can live or die depending on your actions. In my first run, I told Daniel to move her out of the way and spared her, but in my second, Daniel attacks her instead, and I chose to let him get revenge. And when I was going back and experimenting with different choices, one little detail I liked about this was that Sean can try to step in and stop Daniel, but he'll keep going. And from there, you have to decide whether to just let Daniel do his thing, or put Lisbeth out of her misery quicker. Like, those are the kind of details I'm talking about. That's the kind of detail I want to see out of these games. Like, yeah, go ahead and do that, Danny boy, while I have to go back and reload this part's checkpoint because for some reason this was the buggiest part of the game for me. Man, I sure do love Sean getting stuck in a pose and having to reload the entire sequence over and over with no way to skip over what I just watched. Yeah, you just stay there and freeze, Sean. I'm sure that's really, really convincing Daniel right now. I feel kind of indifferent to this episode. I like that they give Daniel a moral conundrum to deal with and how his easy susceptibility is used by this cult. It makes for some really compelling character moments between him and Sean. But the rest? I'm kind of neutral to it. Sean's dialogue with Karen is nice, but there's a little too much hot air with how it goes nowhere at times. And Jacob doesn't add a whole lot despite being one of the only characters to be present in more than one episode. Speaking of hot air, does this summary sound really short to you? Well, that's how it ends up when most of the episode is just this. holy shit, dude, nothing happens. Even on the first playthrough, where it does this to give me more time to explore my surroundings and interact with stuff, these moments drag out way too long. This was tolerable enough in episode 2, started getting on my nerves in episode 3, but here, there are so many moments where quite literally nothing happens. It even starts affecting the choices here. Why is this moment where Sean chooses to get into the truck even an option here? It does nothing for the story and adds nothing. I can't even make a joke calling this a walking simulator because in one of these sections, Sean starts running out of breath and has to stop. Like, oh my god, dude, get a fucking move on already. Okay, something had to have happened behind closed doors here, because otherwise, you can't tell me that this game had several months between episode releases, only for the finished product to have multiple sequences like this where the game's story slams the brakes so many times to the point where you're playing a game that is completely devoid of anything interesting happening multiple times in the exact same episode. I guess if you don't count this, then I did like this episode marginally better than 3. At least there isn't anything overly annoying to me in this episode besides this, like how almost everything in episode 3 bothered me. But that's not saying much when it feels like 2 entire episodes have passed and things have only marginally developed between Sean and Daniel as well.
This is it. We made it, Daniel.
What do we do now?
Make our way across. You ready?
Yeah, I think.
Sean Diaz! It's over! Don't make this worse!
Oh, we were right there, man!
The final episode opens with the two brothers returning from a hike out in the canyons. They're now stowed away in a town called, Away, Arizona. After eating some breakfast, you can chat with the locals, help Daniel complete a sculpture and do a treasure hunt with him, leading to Karen eventually coming back with what looks to be a pretty chill dude.
Glad to see you survived the night in the desert. Howdy, Sean.
Oh my god, is that David?
Think fast.
Whoa, yes! Thanks, David.
Holy shit, it really is him. Okay, this opens up a lot here. So, I've been withholding this information for until I got here. When you first start Life is Strange 2, it'll ask you if you sacrificed Arcadia Bay or not in Life is Strange 1. At first, this is really only for Easter egg stuff. That stop Sean and Brody made, it's a memorial for Arcadia Bay if you sacrificed it. Little stuff like that. In my first run, I went with sacrifice, mainly because I accidentally clicked past it too fast and went, oh, okay, I guess we're gonna roll with this then. But this is the first time it's really brought up in any fashion, so let's get into that. David is a complete 180 from what he was in the last 2 games. Instead of being a really paranoid dick like in the first game, or being a drug PSA and Before the Storm, David's a lot more laid back and relaxed now. He is still a bit paranoid. I mean, one look at his home and you can see that pretty clearly. But it's a far cry from the David we knew before. He's a lot nicer to Sean and Daniel than he was with most everyone else in the previous games. And even helps out Sean and Daniel on their jump to Mexico by giving them a police scanner. But while he does help the brothers, David still has a sit down and gives Sean his honest opinion, that he should turn himself in and let the proper channels handle things, believing it could turn out better for them than if they were to stay wanted in Mexico. It's really nice foreshadowing to what eventually happens at the end of the episode, and this feels still very in character for David given who he was before. This is exactly how I think Charles should have been handled. In episode 2, they get a little too lost in the dramatics of it all and expect you should feel sympathy for him even after what he did. That's not really the case with David. Like, I haven't forgotten that he slapped his stepdaughter in the first game. That was still lingering in the back of my mind. But the game doesn't really present David as this tragic person you should feel sympathy for over his past actions. He's someone who has come to terms with what he did and how the life he's living now is, in some capacity, a result of that. That's what forced him to change. The game never presents David in a tragic light for what happened in the past, and I think that's why what he brought to the game stuck with me better than Charles did. Even then, though, for as much as I like how they handled David, that's admittedly not the part of this that I really liked. It's how all of this ties into the aftermath of the first game that really got me invested, and how it reveals what happened with Max after the events of the first game. Going through his trailer and listening to him after this conversation gives you insight into what happened with Max following the events of the first game. If you sacrificed Arcadia Bay, he'll open up about the trauma of losing everybody, including Joyce, but he also talks about Chloe and how the two of them eventually reconciled and learned to care for one another.
Did you stay in touch? Do you get along now?
Yeah.
took me a while to acknowledge the past was the past and move on. Like they did. Once I realized that, I reached out to them. And we made peace with each other. I stayed here for a while. It felt good to connect with my daughter at last.
Care enough that David's calling her nicknames and she and Max still visit David on occasion. He knows what he did was wrong and, to put it bluntly, knows how lucky he is that Chloe even decided to maintain contact with him and work out their problems with each other in a way where they can care for each other to the degree they do now. And on that note, based on that phone call, Max and Chloe seem to be doing pretty well for themselves despite what happened. Oh man, damn it, I really like this, don't I? I really do like this, damn it. I like this. I like this. God, we only get a sliver of what exactly happened, but it's so intriguing to me. Don't get me wrong, I like what Life is Strange 2 has been doing so far, for the most part, and having a fresh start with new characters was probably the better route for Dontnod to go, but I don't know, man. This shows me there was potential for Dontnod to acknowledge the flaws of the first game and address them in a more direct fashion. Having Chloe make up with David in any capacity tells me there's a lot that has changed with her in between the end of the first game and up to here in the second. It includes intrigue with whatever Max is now doing following everything that happened in Arcadia Bay. It is fun to speculate on, but God, imagine if Dontnod decided to commit to this instead. Have another game focused on Max and Chloe, but with the massive improvements that this game has? Man, I salivated at the thought. Before the Storm was already enough proof that I would have liked Chloe a lot more if Dontnod handled her differently. Commit to that for a full-blown sequel and recontextualize who she was in the first game even more? Dude, I know I'm only speculating on what could have been, but like this is genuinely, this is really good stuff that they added here. And dude, if they went the extra mile and had Max and Chloe actually like talk to Sean and Daniel, like just the potential there. Like having Max open up about her powers and indulge that with someone who also has powers. Like the simple potential of these two characters interacting and talking about that and, you know, bonding over unexplainable powers that they didn't ask for, like, oh, dude, it would be so cool. It would genuinely be such a great thing to have in this series. And if I'm thinking all of this for someone who thought the first game was okay at best, I can't imagine the surprise more hardcore fans got when they got to this part of the game. This is genuinely one of my favorite parts of the game. It serves as both excellent fan service for those who played the first game, but it also directly correlates to enhancing the narrative of the second game. Except there's a catch here, because of course there is. This really only applies if you picked that you saved Arcadia Bay. You get a worse outcome if you chose to sacrifice Chloe, as I picked with my second run. David will talk about how he and Joyce mutually divorced following her murder, but nothing gets more interesting than that. I guess maybe that was intentional, seeing as how saving Chloe was definitely the lesser of the two endings in the original game. And that's not even considering what I think of Chloe. That ending just had much less going on than saving the town. So maybe this is a balancing act of sorts, letting the second game do some heavy lifting to give that ending more meaning. It made me way more interested in Max and Chloe after the events of the first game than I originally anticipated though. You know, even though I don't like Chloe, I think you guys are more than aware of that at this point. I'm not gonna get into that again. I still liked her in Before the Storm. I mean, hey, maybe you could say that this is just planting the seeds for a potential sequel to Max's story that also involves Chloe and also has all the improvements that she had in the previous games as well, and then finally gives us a proper conclusion that is equal parts satisfying and respectful to fans of the franchise that invested so much time into both of these characters, don't you think? But yeah, I did mention David is helping them with their break into Mexico. Karen informs the brothers that the police are starting to pick up that they're around here somewhere, so after saying their goodbyes and Sean having the decision to forgive his mom or stay bitter, they make their way to the border. Daniel opens it with his powers, and the two start walking back to their car.
Daniel! Daniel! Daniel, talk to me! Daniel!
Oh. The police shot him? I mean, I guess that's unexpected. I wasn't expecting Life is Strange to not pull its punches here. I mean, I guess it makes sense with how police are perceived in this country and how big of a problem police brutality is. And...
Hey! Who are you? Hey,
come on!
Do not move if you want to keep that arm. Comprende?
These fuckers blew it up so their friends can cross. So what's the plan, huh? I bet there's a dozen more coming through, right?
No! You're not border agents.
We're citizens. We serve our country.
By shooting people!
Better them than us. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dontnod, you guys really couldn't help yourselves. You had such a powerful message there and you kind of blew it. Like, oh my god, what a way to dull the message you guys could have had there. It's not the police who get them directly, nah, it's these two random racist white folks. And the police only find Sean and Daniel by accident since they take these assholes into custody. Why not have it so that the police simply caught up with them? It would have made Sean's imprisonment and subsequent questioning more impactful if it just ended up that the brothers were this close to freedom and had it stripped away from them because they were finally caught directly, not by complete coincidence. Like, dude, I cannot believe dontnod shot themselves in the foot like this. They could have had a really great way of delivering this message by having the police treat Sean and Daniel as criminals the very second they saw them crossing the border. Having a 10-year-old boy get shot in your game in any capacity is already a strong message that needs no words, but in the context of two scared Mexican kids being chased by police and almost escaping them, that would have been heartbreaking. But no, the game couldn't help itself. We gotta have these two people we never saw before and never will see again to be our scapegoats and make it very obvious to our audience what our message is. And I know you could argue that that's the point with this couple that they suddenly bring into the game too, but it's hard to take it as seriously when they're this over the top and blunt with how they're delivering this message. I mean, hell, if they're going to be this over the top and blunt with delivering this message, don't chicken out on making the police the ones that open fire and use these two random people instead. Like, you're already making it out so that the police are trying to paint Sean and Daniel in a certain light, even in spite of the bad stuff they end up doing in this game. Fuck the police. Fuck ICE. Yeah, I know I'm saying that in a modern context, but even back in 2019 when this came out, can you really look me in the eyes and say that there isn't an uncomfortably large presence of police in the United States who wouldn't even hesitate to do something like this? I don't know if I want to get too far into this because I'd rather not risk speaking too far and having the video suppressed as a result, because regardless of what I ultimately think of how dontnod handles the politics in this game, I still think they're a necessity to discuss and talk about. Dontnod is already pretty damn based for having no fear in portraying the racial issues that the United States has been facing in the past couple of decades specifically, and being so unfortunately accurate about it too. But why risk the real nuance and genuine intelligence of your story with bits like this when the narrative is at its most effective when it lets players fill these gaps in themselves instead of being told what these gaps are? This is just like another core issue I have with how dontnod handles this kind of stuff in their games, because this isn't just isolated to the politics at all. There are too many moments in this game where instead of letting a moment speak for itself and letting the audience feel what they want, should, or need to feel, they tell players how they should feel. And please believe me and hear me out when I say I'm not trying to argue that this stuff doesn't happen, because it unfortunately does, but it gets heavy-handed to the point where it can kind of come across as condescending here. Like, even if you wanted to keep this part of the game the same, where this couple manages to get Sean, I don't need the game to spoon-feed it to me how evil these people are. I can pretty quickly surmise what they think of Sean and Daniel just from the fact alone that they shot a fucking child. What I'm trying to get across is that this game is telling a story first and foremost. It's not going to be effective if you shape your story around a message instead of having those messages supplement and enhance your story. Because unless your intention is to make a PSA, your story is going to suffer when you're more concerned with making scenes like this and telling people how they should feel instead of letting those feelings come naturally. Because that's what a story is supposed to do. This is why I keep bringing up balance in these videos, because between this and the first game, this seems to be a consistent thing dontnod is constantly struggling with, and it gets to a point where it is frustrating, because there's a lot of ideas in Life is Strange 2 that are really great, and I really want to absolutely love this game like so many people have, but the delivery of it is constantly one extreme or the other in this game. Things are either too direct or not direct at all. The pacing is way too slow or it's way too fast. The politics are either implicit or right in your face. The game design is either openly rewarding or narrowly punishing. And this is why it frustrates me so much, because when it's not having this constant tug of war, Life is Strange 2 is great, because those moments when it does find its footing, I think what we have here is fantastic stuff. It's so detrimental to a game that I honestly think would have been really special if they found that balance and they stuck to it. Because I really do mean it, like when they find their balance in this game, like it is really fantastic stuff that they're throwing here. Like in this next part of the game. Okay, Sean gets taken into custody and meets a Mexican couple that tried to cross the border into America. He has a pleasant conversation with them, and they even further foreshadow things later on when they tell Sean that things aren't exactly bright and happy in Mexico either. It's a really nice and nuanced conversation they have about the pros and cons of going into another country, and
now you and your unborn parasite have nothing in common with me and my family.
Oh my god, shut up, game, I get it. Jarvis, I mean Daniel, take these motherfuckers out. But okay, to get back onto my point, I think one really great moment in this game comes in the form of the officer that interrogates Sean towards the end of this game. This feels like a direct response to how dontnod handled Max talking to her other self. In the first Life is Strange, this moment got condescending because it made direct assumptions about why the player played the game the way they did, with little wiggle room to make your case and explain or understand why you played the way you did it. It didn't present its choices, its morality, or its themes and leave the player to decide what to make of them. It tried to argue the real reason why you played the way you did, even if it was totally false. This part of the game makes up for it. In my high morality run, this doesn't make as much of an impact, but in my low morality run, the officer continues to list all the extra things I did that I never needed to. Robbing the gas station, whether or not I killed Lisbeth. Instead of the game telling me why I made these decisions, all it did was present them from the perspective of an officer that clearly feels a certain way about Sean, and it had my mind racing. I was playing Sean this way because I wanted to see the different results of my actions, but now I'm being confronted with those choices I made from the perspective of someone who wants to see me in prison. Did I actually make things worse for Sean and Daniel in the long run? In the process of playing the game and making these morally wrong decisions, was I suddenly complacent in morphing Sean into this stereotype he and Daniel have been so desperate to shake off this whole game? In my high morality run, I only did things as needed or as the story called for it, and mostly turned up fine. But in my second run, I could have chosen again not to rob the safe. I could have chosen not to shoot Lisbeth. I could have chosen to be a better person and leave the racist couple instead of getting revenge. I could have chosen to be more passive and peaceful. Again, I may be giving dontnod way too much credit for this, but this is how I felt when I played this part of the game. And it's when Life is Strange 2 presents its politics like this that I think it's incredibly effective at blending its story with its motifs. The game needed to have more moments like this where it touches on how these politics reflect on its characters and how they could potentially reflect on the people playing them. Because when Life is Strange 2 does that, it does that really, really well. Ultimately, what I'm getting at is that I just wish that kind of clever writing extended to the moments where things get really on the nose like this. The game is at its most effective in this aspect when it reflects these ideas in the story and characters, and presents them in a way that gets the player to think about their actions. Where it struggles is when it has moments that are completely detached from the story and forget about it for a moment to spread awareness for a message that, while still very important and very right to express, can detract from the very story it's delivering by telling players how they should feel instead of letting their feelings come naturally. This right here, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about balance for this game. This is where the game finds its balance, this is where it finds its consistency, and this is where the game thrives. It's direct in what it's trying to accomplish, but it's not so direct that it's telling you what to feel. It isn't paced too fast, but it isn't too slow either. The politics are there for the story, but they aren't so heavy-handed that they forget about the story. Its gameplay segments aren't too open, but they aren't too restrictive either. Like, I'm saying balance a lot in this video, but like, this is the kind of balance I'm talking about. When the game is finding this balance, it's at its absolute best. It needed to maintain this, not have it in select parts like with Lisbeth's fate, or meeting Brody, or when the brothers meet their grandparents. All of these moments right here, this is what the game needed to consistently have. And thankfully, in this last moment, to Life is Strange 2's benefits, this is how the game ends. Sean is eventually saved by Daniel to make their escape, and this is where things can go a few different ways. Daniel's demeanor can be pretty different depending on your choices across the game here. In my first run, Daniel was confident but still reserved about using his powers. Most of what I did involved doing the right thing, including Sean having him break out the Mexican couple, and even get the option to break out the racist couple. In my second run, however, this was the total opposite. Daniel is pretty ruthless with his powers. On the couple, on the police officers, he gets pretty extreme with them. Sean and Daniel make their way to the border again, but are stopped by a whole armada of police. And we get our final choice. Either have Sean and Daniel surrender to the authorities, or make a break for Mexico. Here's where things get interesting. Life is Strange 2 has multiple endings again. This isn't the last game where it's simply Rachel not liking her dad or hating her dad. It isn't even Life is Strange 1 with how none of the choices up to the final one played a role in any capacity. On the surface, it may seem like this is another binary choice like the first game, but it's more than that. Holy shit, it's so much more than that. On my first playthrough, I chose to surrender at first. This gives us a montage of Daniel growing up with Claire and Steven, while Sean does his time behind bars for 15 years. He reunites with Daniel, Karen, and even Lila at the very end, and things end on a bit of a melancholic note. Sean breaks down after finally being a free man and Daniel comforts him, but the two move on with their lives, likely finding whatever their next chapter is. I rewound the game after this to get the other ending and chose to have the brothers make a break from Mexico, but surprisingly, after clearing the way, Daniel jumps out of the vehicle and lets Sean escape by himself. We get a similar montage, but this time, the game ends with Daniel getting a letter from Sean. He made it to Puerto Lobos. Depending on who you romanced before, Cassidy or Finn can be with him. The brothers are apart and probably will be for the rest of their lives, but they're both happy in their own ways. There are also two bad endings you can get in the game. One involves Sean and Daniel successfully crossing the border, but not without a ton of collateral damage, and they establish their lives in Puerto Lobos, albeit not without some more criminal activity coming their way if the montage beforehand is any indication. The last ending isn't even subtle about this part. In that ending, Sean can try to give himself up, but Daniel will use his powers to step on the gas and get him and Sean across anyways. This is definitely the worst ending, as while the brothers make it across to Mexico, Sean is shot in the neck and dies from his wounds, leaving Daniel on his own to become a ruthless criminal. All of this comes down to how you treated Daniel across the entire game. Now, I'll try to keep this brief as I want to save the brothers for their very own section, as I've been talking about, alongside discussing the choices in more detail, but all of those choices you've been making across the game have one key difference compared to the other games. Every other Life is Strange game always broke down your choices by how they affected the world around you, and in this game, Sean does have a world around him. It's Daniel. While there are more general choices you can make in each episode, almost every single one ties back to Daniel in some way. Whether or not you can choose to steal, the times you have Daniel use his powers, even some of the things Sean does that are unrelated to his brother. All of your decisions will affect Daniel, his sense of morality, his sense of brotherhood. Every single decision you make revolves around Daniel. Each of the game's 4 endings are reflective of the kind of person Sean made Daniel out to be by the end of the game. The kind of person you made Daniel out to be by the end. It's not just Sean's decision here that will dictate how things play out. It's how Daniel chooses to react to that determines what your outcome is here, leaving for an ending that isn't entirely dependent on you. It's just as dependent on Daniel and what he learns from Sean across the game as it is on Sean's choices up to this time, both in how he conducted himself, but how he chose to raise his brother across the entire game. This might be my favorite part of the entire series. Life is Strange 2 is a journey with a lot of missteps, but Life is Strange 2, at its core, is a story about brothers. Two brothers who go on a journey to run from consequences they were never at fault for. Consequences that mount up as they continue their journey. Consequences that they constantly try to escape at every turn but always seem to be right on their tail. Consequences they don't want to acknowledge on the way that they want to keep running from because maybe, just maybe, it'll all work out. And what those endings say about consequence, how you can keep running from it or choose to face it, and how neither one may be the right or wrong answer, and how the consequences of those actions shape the person your brother will eventually become, it's incredible. In the 2 good endings, there's no right or wrong answer. Things don't fully work out in the brothers' favor. Either Sean has to face time for crimes he did and didn't commit, or he's a free man, but at the cost of seeing his brother again. In the 2 bad endings, Sean and Daniel sacrifice everything about them for the sake of family and unity, or Daniel is forced to face the harsh reality of what happens when you run from the consequences for too long. Have I said consequences enough times yet? I don't think I have. Life is Strange 2's narrative is not one of the greatest things I've ever experienced, and as I'll continue to get into, there are still some issues I take with it. Maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome like Max caught, maybe it's because I always thought the rest of the games were meh at best, but Life is Strange 2? It's good. It's pretty good. It's really good. The blemishes that it does have, even the ones that are really big blemishes, like episode 3 is probably the worst part of this entire game. I really dreaded playing through that, but everything else? No, I had a really great time playing this game. I can't believe I'm saying that. I mostly enjoyed my time with a Life is Strange game. Yeah, I guess I did find equal enjoyment here that I did for the first game, but don't forget, Life is Strange 1 is a guilty pleasure game of mine. I enjoy that game for a lot of wrong reasons in addition to the right ones. That's not the case with Life is Strange 2. There were definitely a few roadblocks along the way, but this is a road trip I still really enjoyed and did not get tired of. At least until I had to start experimenting with different choices at the end there in sort of a third run, but I think that probably has more to do with getting close to burnout. I think any game will burn you out like that if you play it over and over again over a long period of time, and not being able to skip cutscenes. But I spent almost 30 hours of this game, and man dude, there were some moments I really disliked, but I never got tired of it. It always felt like I was discovering some new little details every time I played or experimented with it. Even now, I feel like there's still small details I've missed across the game. And I love it when games have that. I know it's a little thing, but it's a little thing that gets me excited if I ever decide to go back to a game, you know? It's because of this that I can say with confidence that, despite how I feel about certain areas of the game, Life is Strange 2 manages to pull it all together to end on a high note. The ending you get is the ending you put work into. Do you set an example of pride for Daniel, or an example of survival? I think most people are going to gravitate towards pride, and that's probably the only real bad thing I can say about these endings. They're very clear-cut good and bad endings. I sure did hate Chloe, and that made my final choice at the end of the first game easy, but there was at least a moral conundrum there for people who did like Chloe. But for a game to truly take into consideration how you raise Daniel this much, and for it to fully affect how the game ends, dontnod deserves so much praise for that. They really saw the criticism the first game had from its choices not having much impact on the narrative, let alone the ending, and good God, did they deliver on fixing that. I truly, genuinely cannot believe that I'm about to say this in a Life is Strange video, but this reminded me of The Walking Dead. And for any game, let alone a Life is Strange game, to make me feel that same kind of way, when it evokes the same feelings as the first video game that made me cry, the first video game I truly found myself investing in a narrative, the first video game that showed me what video games could do as works of art, I'm speechless. I genuinely cannot think of a higher praise I can possibly give to a game. Especially when it comes to the game's anchor. Because just like with The Walking Dead, which was built around the relationship you form with Lee and Clementine, Life is Strange 2, at its core, is about two people.
The Wolf brothers joined a pack of hounds that roamed all over. Finally, the brothers had found new friends.
Alright, let's get into the characters here. So, unlike the last two games, I'm not going to delve into every single character in this game. Since so many come and go in this game, and some of them you barely get a chance to interact with, there's not much I really have to say this time around that would warrant looking at every single character in the game. You guys are already here for the long haul. This video is probably by this point at least well over 2 hours. I'm not gonna waste your time. I'm trying to respect it as much as I can. Especially if the list simply looks like Brett, he's an asshole. Matthews, he kills Sean and Daniel's dad. Nick, you pull a prank on him. Chad and Mike, racist. Maria, Sean's attorney. Cougar, kills a dog. When the most insight I have on some characters is, oh, that family at the gas station doesn't even have names, they're just mother, father, and daughter? Yeah, no, I'm not putting much thought into it. Although it's pretty funny we managed to get below calling two characters the Pitnick couple from the last game. So if there's a character that isn't on here, that's either because I just didn't have enough to talk about, or there is quite literally nothing I can talk about. That said, let's get into characters I do want to talk about. Esteban. Esteban's a pretty cool guy. I like how laid back he is when it comes to how he speaks with Sean and Daniel during the times you do interact with him, but more importantly, I like that he isn't afraid to not know everything. He's honest with Sean about needing help with Daniel, still expresses positivity with him even when he's trying to be assertive. He seems like a good dad. Kinda sucks that his death is the catalyst that sets everything off. I wish you got to see a little more of him. Lila. Right off the bat, you know something I really love about Lila? She and Sean are best friends, and in any other story, I'd feel like the most likely outcome of these two characters is starting a romantic relationship. That never happens with Lila. Obviously, part of that is because she isn't in the game that much, but Sean and Lila's relationship is strictly platonic. They act like siblings to one another more than anything else, and I find that extremely refreshing. It could have been so easy for the writers to fall into that best friends to lovers trope, especially when Max could potentially do that with Chloe in the first game, but they stuck to making things simple with these two, even down to Lila encouraging her friend about asking out another girl at school. Those optional phone calls you can have with her are also some of my favorite moments in the entire game. Lila is another character I really wish we got to see more of, because what little we do get of her here is really effective and interesting stuff. Brody. It does admittedly frustrate me a bit that Brody is the first character you can really get to know, and they kind of tease how Sean's different dialogue will give you new insights into who he is, but after playing the second time, I learned that this never goes past that surface level. Which sucks, because I think otherwise, Brody's a pretty decent character for what little we get of him. He's another character that is generally carefree, and he serves his purpose well as someone who encourages Sean to do what he thinks is best, as well as prepare you for what might happen in your journey to Puerto Lobos. Hank and Doris. Besides giving us that infamous bit of dialogue, I feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity to have both characters interact with Sean after he's captured. Doris's demeanor around Sean and Daniel changes depending on if you steal or not, if you speak to her, etc. It would have been cool to see that play out when he's captured. Like, maybe Doris agrees with her husband if Sean stole anything, but is a lot more hesitant or even defiant if Sean was nice and bought everything he got. Otherwise, there's not much I can say here. Chris. I may get some heat for this, but I honestly believe Chris would have been a much better character in this game had he not gotten his own demo. Because what is here isn't really making him a bad character, but how much focus they put on him, I think ends up hurting him in the full game. We learned so much about Chris, his home life, how he's coping with the passing of his mom, how he's handling his dad being an alcoholic, and on paper these are all fine. Pretty generic, dontnod really doesn't break any new ground with this character archetype, but fine. But if they were going to spend this much time developing one character to serve as a tease for what to expect in Life is Strange 2, then it needed to be on a character that would have had way more presence in the story beyond one episode. Chris becomes a lingering backthought for Sean and Daniel after this episode, but it never goes beyond that. I know I'm repeating complaints a lot here, and specifically the one that these characters needed more screen time but weren't given it because of how the story is structured. You might be able to make a drinking game out of it at this rate. Or don't, I don't want to be responsible for whatever y'all do when you're knocked out drunk. But this issue with the game's characters is at its worst with Chris. Why spend all that time trying to develop Chris and get your audience to connect with him, and then only relegate him to a single episode where he isn't even the focus? Hell, thinking about this now, I wonder why this demo idea wasn't done with Daniel instead, and having it set months before this game's events kickstart. You can still have this presentation seeing the world through a kid's eyes, but this time it's through a kid you directly influence over the course of the full game. How awesome would that have been, to have played through a similar demo, but this time it's through Daniel seeing the world, how he sees his father, maybe he views Sean a certain way, particularly when they get into their sibling scuffles, and knowing all of that could affect how you play the entire game as Sean? Because then you have that background knowledge of how Daniel views his brother, and that will be at the forefront of a player's mind when they do make decisions as Sean regarding Daniel. You can even keep the entire bit about the mother not being around anymore because it still applies to Daniel, albeit in a different way from Chris. God damn it, now that I'm saying it out loud, that would have been so great. And it still could pull on the heartstrings in an effective way that directly affects how you play Life is Strange 2. Instead, what we got is a surface level attempt of making a tragic child character with Chris that, while not a bad character himself, gets the writers so wrapped up in the tragedy of his mother dying and his father being abusive that it becomes comical when the game throws one more horrible thing into this kid's life by having a police officer hit him and knock him out cold. I thought them adding the detail of Chloe's cat dying the same year William died and Max left was hilariously ridiculous, but they managed to one-up Deck 9 here. I'm a little impressed. Charles. I do find it interesting that dontnod added details to try and make you understand why Charles is the way he is. His wife was killed in an apparent hit and run, and he seems to be the only thing trying to get justice for this. And he does have some interesting perspectives he shares about his life if Sean gets him to open up. But let's not forget he also said this. I already talked about this in length in episode 2, but I'll re-emphasize, if you discuss topics like this, you have to give it the depth and respect it truly deserves. Claire and Steven. These two might be my favorite side characters in the game. There's obviously a lot of complexity involved with a relationship like the brothers have with their grandparents in this game, let alone the situation that reunites them in the first place. But what I love about Claire and Steven here is how straight and simple they play things, even with all those lingering elements. Both of them are your traditional religious grandparents. They've got their own interests, like Steven with model trains and Claire with painting. And while they're stern and strict with the boys about how they behave and what they do, especially in Claire's case, you can still tell that frustration they all feel, particularly when they get caught in Karen's room, is still related to what they simply feel is best for their family. I love that even after having such a heated argument, all of them still come together to help Steven when the cabinet falls on him, and when the police finally find out about the brothers' presence there, they don't hesitate to continue helping the two of them. Even if Daniel never reveals his powers, there's still that implicit feeling you get that Claire and Steven know what happened with Sean and Daniel isn't the full story. They do a fantastic job here balancing the melodrama with the excellent character moments. It just sucks that, besides Karen, Sean and Daniel don't get this type of relationship with other characters in the game. Hannah. I really didn't like Hannah's presence in this game whatsoever. She really gives the whole they're an asshole but you gotta learn to love them vibe whenever she speaks to people in this game. Like, no. She's just an asshole. I don't want to talk to this person.
And then you come crying about hobos spreading garbage in the forest?
Ooh, it's 420.
Now you're here sponging off us trash on an illegal pot farm with a tourist visa.
Hey, Sean, let's talk.
I just fucking hate phonies. Too many here. Crusty backpack doesn't make you one of us.
Ow, my arm hurts.
Wah wah.
I don't care if she directly acknowledges it. You're this old and talking this way to a teenager? That's embarrassing. There's not a lot I have to say about her, but she still might be the worst character in the series so far for me. Oh my gosh, you would put her below Chloe? Yes. I would put her below Chloe. I just really dislike this character, and it probably would have been a benefit to the game's story if she was cut. Penny. Dude's got some paranoia, but that's all I can really say about him if I'm being honest. His story at the campfire is probably the most interesting one to me about how one of his friends and likely partners wandered off and disappeared, but beyond that, I don't really get much out of him. Ingrid and Anders. You know, for being Swedish immigrants on a journey throughout the United States, this was a massive missed opportunity to have them parallel Sean and Daniel trying to get to Mexico. I think there could have been some decent insight they could give Sean directly when it comes to going to another country altogether. Might have foreshadowed the ending more and have you think more on if escaping to Mexico is really better than surrendering to the authorities. But as far as I can tell, Sean can't even directly talk to either of them at any time during the episode. The most we get is this moment from Anders, which is honestly pretty funny if I'm being real.
Hey, dudes! I am drunk. No shit.
Meryl. Life is Strange really couldn't help itself. Now we got a duo of characters that are over-the-top evil to you. Like, there's not a lot to work with here. Meryl has one offhand comment about how he's doing all of this to provide for his family, but that's it. The rest is just vague notions about how the people he deals with are worse. He's just not a really intimidating presence in the story. It's extra funny too when you consider that weed was legalized in California in 2016, and this episode takes place on a weed farm in California in 2017. So treating a weed farm as some super underground and extremely illegal thing is already funny enough, but like, dude, shit's legal in California now. I'm sure there's definitely some nuances to all of them, Miss saying I'm definitely not a legal expert. My point is that it's really goofy how they present this like they're distributing crack or something. Big Joe. Unlike Meryl, however, Big Joe's got nothing to him. He just constantly yells. That's it. It's like if they took David from the first game and ripped away any personality he had. Finn. Finn is okay, I suppose. He's very much a go-with-the-flow type character, but his personality in this game annoys me. Sometimes for reasons I can't exactly pinpoint. It's that entire front about being zen and chill coming across as really fake to me, and I guess considering he gets Daniel to steal the safe money for himself, I can't say that's entirely inaccurate. But then they still try to treat it like this is an authentic part of himself after you meet him in the hospital if he lived. Like, dude, you just used a 9-year-old boy to break into a drug dealer's safe. Don't act like I'm the only problem here when it comes to raising Daniel. Cassidy. Cassidy's nuts across your face, lol. I'm so tired. Look, if I don't make that joke, someone else is, okay? No one else gets to make that joke. I'm gonna make it unfunny now. I think they do a better job with Finn's character archetype with someone like Cassidy. She's similarly easygoing and bright, but unlike Finn, she isn't afraid to show how she really feels, whether it be from telling Sean she can defend herself just fine, or how instantly she turns on Finn when he uses Daniel to get into the safe. Since she gets a little more screen time with Sean in episode 2, I think their romance is a bit more believable if you decide to go that route. Seems like the writers thought this too since she becomes an important part of Sean and Daniel's conflict in this episode. Otherwise, I think Cassidy is fine. Didn't blow my mind at all, but she's probably the only side character in episode 3 I could at least tolerate. Joey. At first I was only going to mention Joey here because of how ridiculously involved it gets to simply have him help Sean escape, but I also want to point out how it's pretty refreshing to see a character treat someone this way that, far as he can tell, is an accused criminal. I'm not saying you should be overly nice to every single person you meet, just that it takes a lot of strength to choose kindness, and it was cool to see such a small character like Joey embrace that for how little he knew about Sean. Jacob. While he's in episode 3, Jacob really doesn't contribute much until he shows up in episode 4. And even then, it feels like everything about him comes and goes. The subplot about getting his sister out of a cult comes and goes. The detail about how he dealt with conversion therapy for being gay comes and goes. Him discussing how he thought Daniel's power was some religious intervention only to find out he was wrong much later comes and goes. I don't know, I see the ideas they have with Jacob here and what they wanted to explore, but he isn't given enough time or depth to really make me feel any particular way about anything going on with him. One little story detail I wish they were more clear on though is how he contacted Sean and Daniel's mom in the first place. She comes out of nowhere here, and while we find out Jacob wrote to her, it's not exactly clear how he found out that information, let alone exactly what his connection to Karen is, if any exists. Karen. Speaking of which, yeah, Karen shows up out of nowhere. Like I talked about with episode 4, they use a lot of big words that mean nothing for an explanation of Karen that basically boils down to she wasn't happy being in a family, so she left to figure herself out. And there's nothing wrong with that or exploring the complexities that come with a parent leaving their kids like that, but Life is Strange 2 tries to make it seem bigger, more profound, and more complex than it actually ends up being in the finished product. Something I wish they did a better job of was letting the player be more defiant towards her if they so choose. This game really wants to nudge players towards having Sean forgive Karen to varying degrees, but I don't know if it's entirely fair to tell players that it's this easy to forgive a parent that left you. Even for all the good that Karen does for the brothers, it's still okay for Sean to harbor some resentment. Maybe even framing it in a way where Sean makes it known to her that this is what she missed out on all this time. This is one of the themes they do a better job of handling in this game. I just wish it had some more flexibility in how you could react to it. Lisbeth. She's a crazy cult leader, there's literally nothing else here. Like Meryl and Big Joe, she's too over the top for me to really take her seriously. She's a bigger threat at least, since what she's doing directly affects Daniel instead, but what we have here is still pretty surface level. There's not a whole lot of depth or nuance given to her. It is neat that there are so many different ways her part in this story can finish towards the end of the episode. I'll give the game credit for that at least. And how her actions directly strain Sean and Daniel's relationship is a lot more than I can say about Meryl and Big Joe. Joan, Stanley, and Arthur. I decided to group these three together because there's not a lot to them here individually. Joan is an artist who uses whatever she can to sculpt. Stanley and Arthur are a gay couple who left everything behind to have an easier time being together. They're mostly here to give Sean an idea of what it might be like starting over if he decides to continue to Puerto Lobos, and in that sense, I think they serve their purpose well enough. Diego and Carla. Similarly, I like that Diego and Carla serve their purpose of showing Sean how hard the process of starting over can be. It's not always this seamless thing that Sean keeps envisioning when he gets to Mexico with Daniel. It can take a lot of strength and enduring a lot of hardship to do so sometimes. They aren't in this game for very long, but they leave a pretty strong impact on Sean and the player when it eventually comes to that final decision. David. I don't know how much more I can say about David's inclusion that I didn't already discuss in episode 5. His presence here is great, and he's one of the best side characters in the game. It's a perfect example of how to handle fan service. He doesn't intrude too much on the story, but he does just enough to justify being in it by having that honest conversation with Sean about whether going to Mexico is the right thing, or if maybe turning himself in is the potentially better option. And the breadcrumbs it leaves for people who played the first game are chef's kiss. Mainly if you chose to save Chloe. God, I cannot emphasize enough, imagine if we got a follow-up with Max and Chloe, but Chloe had the improvements and development she had from before the storm, and Max had the opportunity to become a stronger and better character too. Max could have pushed herself to be a more firm and upstanding person. Chloe could have those honest moments of regret like she did in Before the Storm. Maybe even acknowledge that shooting David's gun was stupid. There is so much missed potential there, but we'll talk about that when I get to Double Exposure. I know, I keep bringing that game up. I really have a lot I want to say and can't yet because we're not there, but I swear all this build up to that game I'm teasing will be worth the wait. Okay, I'm not even talking about David anymore. Let's wrap this up before I get too off track. Mushroom.
What the dog doing?
Yeah, that's the best I could come up with here. I don't know, sue me.
Just don't lie to me ever again.
I promise. I won't lie to you again. I promise.
I guess we're doing protagonist analyses separately now. Suppose I should have done that for Max too. Oh well, I'll rectify that when I get to Double Exposure. Alright, I have previously ended the last Life is Strange videos on a low note. I think this time we should close things out on a very high note. So I went back and forth on how exactly I was going to talk about the Diaz brothers, and this is what I settled on. Sean and Daniel are obviously their own separate characters, and I want to talk about them as such, but I also can't ignore that pretty much all of Life is Strange 2's main drive is the relationship these two develop throughout the course of the story. Now, as I've gone over more than enough times, I think one of Life is Strange 2's sore spots is with the extended cast. Outside of a few exceptions, this game's story doesn't always do a graceful job of balancing its large cast with the road trip approach to this game's story. Sometimes they work decently enough and are supplemental to Sean and Daniel's journey. Other times, especially in episode 3, they try to have their cake and eat it too by having characters come into the forefront as being very important, only for the story to forget about them, either because it has to or because it wants to. For as much criticism as I gave Life is Strange 1 in regards to its extended cast, I do think it generally had a better handle on this. Yes, some characters could get over the top in that game, and things are more consistent because the first game's story is stationary. Of course, they're going to naturally flow better. But it also made for protagonists that could blend in with its cast at times. For as much as I love Max in the first game, I don't think you can deny that that game wasn't entirely about her. Her and Chloe's relationship was a core focus, and developing that was a key part, but it was also about the two of them solving a mystery plaguing their hometown. And I guess to give the quickest recap I can on Chloe, because you guys are aware of what I think of Chloe. I didn't like her in the first game, I liked her in the second game at least, but Before the Storm's character problems had nothing to do with her. That game's problem was that most of its cast was interesting in concept at best, and some of the most insulting characters I've seen in a work of fiction at worst. But if Life is Strange 2 was gonna go any route, I'm glad that these are the problems it has this time, because they make room for what I think are two of the most three-dimensional characters I've ever seen in a video game. Sean Diaz and Daniel Diaz are, no questions asked, the best Life is Strange characters dontnod has ever made. What kept me around, besides how much dontnod really listened to feedback from the first game and tried to make a game that was much better than the first, was how enthralled I was from beginning to end, watching the story of Sean and Daniel unfold across Life is Strange 2. First off, I have to give massive props to Gonzalo Martin and Roman George for their performances here. By and far the best ones in this entire game.
I didn't know Roman before Life is Strange. We met here on the studio. A little kid came into the room while I was recording, and they say, we're gonna do dual mic now, so he's your little brother. Really cool kid, had a lot of fun working with him, and he really has Daniel inside of him.
Me and Gonzalo work in scenes together. I think both of us, help each other get our emotions out. I really enjoy working on Life is Strange 2. It's fun, amazing. It's really cool for voiceover. Personally, it's one of my favorite things I've ever done in my acting career.
They're good enough that, I don't really know what I can say here of value. There was never a moment where I was taken out of the experience that I thought a line delivery was weird or off, that it sounded like things could have been better. This is as quality as Hannah Tell as Max and Ashley Birch as Chloe. These two knocked it out of the park with their performances as Sean and Daniel. So, let's get into Sean first. From a narrative perspective, he's an amazing and dynamic character, but from a gameplay perspective, he's this fantastic blend of Max from the first game and Chloe from Before the Storm. On the surface, Sean is your usual 16-year-old guy. He's bright, he's a bit angsty, he's got a real talent for drawing, and generally a lot of blanket terms I could use to describe just about any teenager if I'm being real honest. What makes Sean work so well in this game is that for the most part, these traits are entirely up to you. Sean can be a really chill person, minding his own business, being a little cringe in his own way because of course he isn't a Life is Strange game.
Looks like a clicker. Creepy.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, that scene is more awkward than it is cringe, but what I'm trying to say here is that Sean acts like what you'd expect out of a teenager in the mid-2010s. But there are moments where he's short-tempered, aggressive, has a habit of stealing, or in general doing some hooligan shit, but it's up to you how much you want Sean to lean into this. Depending on how you play him, Sean can be an upstanding guy, trying his best to see the positivity in a bad situation, standing up for people he cares about, or he can be short-tempered, prone to picking a fight with people, and quick to assert and shut down anyone who tries to argue with him, or he can be sincerely empathetic, unafraid to be raw with his emotions without any real care on how it might look to other people. And like Max in the first game, it's all put together in a way that always feels realistic and natural for Sean. These would still be natural ways for him to react if the player was watching him instead of playing as him. His journal entries reflect this pretty well too. Unlike Max and Chloe having journals that are very detailed, Sean's are very straightforward and to the point, usually letting his drawings do the talking. It's a really nice show don't tell detail I appreciated seeing in the game. It makes sense that Sean would be dealing with this vast array of emotions like this because, well, he's a teenage boy. But by making these traits happen naturally in some instances while the rest is entirely up for the player to decide, makes for what is so far the most three-dimensional protagonist we've had in this series. Max's benefits were that she was a soft-spoken, quirky, adorable, but firm and independent girl who likes to snoop. And the game's choices almost always reflected that, which allowed her to thrive in those areas specifically, but it didn't do much as far as how dynamically you could play as Max. Chloe admittedly fixed this in Before the Storm, as in that game, she's able to be a more sympathetic, level-headed, chilled-out character, but you could also deliberately make her more toxic and selfish like she was in that first game. Her issues stemmed from how all of this was applied to her in a prequel, meaning there was no way for her to meaningfully transition to the Chloe we knew in the first game. But as I said in that video, I would have argued that in Chloe's case, it would have been a good thing had Before the Storm been its own thing, disconnected from the first game. Well, that's what we have here with Sean. You have that same baseline level of likability that Max had, while also maintaining those dynamic character elements that were one of the very few good things to come out of Before the Storm. In one moment, you can have Sean opening up to the people at his camp about some of the trauma he's dealt with in the past, or he can keep his mouth shut. He can chew Finn out for even thinking of doing a heist with Daniel involved, or he can look for the silver lining that might come out of getting that much money. One of my favorite things I discovered in this game was in episode 2, when I was doing all of that juggling to figure out different outcomes with Chris. I was going back and forth between my two save files with the good endings and the bad endings. This game really does take into account how you choose to play Sean. During that argument he had with Claire, in my run where Sean was more chill and nice, his responses were reflective of that, coming across more so as apologetic and trying to appeal to Claire. But in my run with the bad endings, where I was having Sean be a bit more of an asshole, his responses to Claire are a lot more aggressive. He yells at Claire, and he puts her on the defensive instead. I know when you really boil it down, this isn't affecting much with the story itself, but I don't really mind that. I know this narrative is locked. I wish there could have been a little more flexibility at some points, but I don't mind that the narrative is stuck. As I talked about in the first video, what makes me want to replay these point-and-click narrative adventure games is seeing how I can interact differently with the world around me, and if it reacts back differently. I know Life is Strange 2's story is always going to be the same, but man, it was so engaging to play it twice and run through the extra stuff to see how differently things within that narrative could play out. I don't think this quite reaches Walking Dead levels since that game had an entire cast to work for with this kind of thing. And God, it has my mind racing with possibilities if this game was more stationary. We could have had Life is Strange's answer to Lee and Kenny, having that one character that is either best friends with Sean or hates his guts the entire run. Maybe Lyra could have been that character. You can either maintain being best friends with her, or Sean's actions, your actions, causes the two of them to drift apart. That is unfortunately one detriment of Life is Strange 2, is that Sean's relationship with other characters can't be as strong as it could have been. Since there isn't a core cast the game works with, it can be more difficult to pinpoint what other characters think of Sean. Hell, play your cards right, you could potentially have him be a totally different character for every single episode. But hey, you could also argue that's a benefit, because then it makes for a Sean that proves to be very adaptable to his surroundings. Like, maybe he's more shut in around Claire and Steven, but he's more open with the crew at the pot farm, or the other way around. All of this would already be great in itself, Sean having this much going on with him, but managing to make him a consistently likable protagonist is not an easy thing to do, and they pull it off very well here. But what takes this to another level that makes it unmatched to other games like this I've played is what might be the most important part of this entire game. Daniel. It cannot be overstated enough how difficult it is to write a child character. You constantly run that risk of making them too childlike and even annoying for a player to meaningfully connect with them, or make them too adult-like and multifaceted that a player cannot realistically bond with them the way they should. When I think of the best child characters in gaming, it's always the ones that manage to perfectly walk that balance of childlike whimsy and mature growth. Clementine's the obvious example in comparison I probably make here because, of course. But there are others. Ellie from The Last of Us is a pretty obvious example that they probably took inspiration from. And I can think of some that might be a little less obvious. Yuffie from Final Fantasy VII is a major one that sticks out of my mind. I haven't played these games myself, but Atreus from God of War 2018 is one I see brought up a lot, as is Heather Mason from Silent Hill 3. Tails from the Sonic series, God willing the games give him some good characterization. And Lord knows there's a good reason why Sora from Kingdom Hearts is one of the most iconic characters in the entire industry. But after playing and researching as much of Life is Strange 2 as I have the past couple of months, I really believe there's a case for Daniel Diaz to be considered among some of the best kid characters ever brought to a video game. Hell, I'll take it a step further when it comes to Life is Strange specifically. Daniel is the best part of this entire game, and a strong contender for the best character in this entire series. Like Sean, on the surface, Daniel is about what you would expect from a character like this. He's a kid, he likes candy, playing with toys, and playing make-believe with other kids his age. He's quick to be pouty and gets annoyed if he doesn't get something he wants, but at the same time he gets attention-starved, he develops surface-level crushes, and it can feel like his sole existence is to annoy the hell out of Sean. But there are also brief moments where he does show some growth. But what kind of growth this is, how he develops, and who he will eventually become, a lot of that hinges on Sean's choices in this game. Your choices. Now at first, I wasn't entirely sure how to discuss the choices in this game this time around, because when you look at decisions that are unrelated to Daniel, I think they still have the same problems the last two games had. They don't have any true staying power, and the very little staying power they do have is barely addressed in the game's endings, if at all. The game does tell you what the world you leave behind is like to a degree, but some of your choices don't really reflect on the endings you get. What does reflect are all of your choices involving Daniel. While your choices don't really have any ramifications for any characters you talk to, I can tell you right now, with certainty, they have tremendous ramifications for Daniel. How you play and develop Sean throughout the game is how Daniel will develop. Depending on your actions, Daniel can evolve to become a selfish brat who swears all the time, a polite and well-meaning kid doing his best, a jealous brother who isn't afraid to take his aggression out. Kids are malleable, and Daniel tends to stick to his brother like glue when he's around. So just like Sean, these traits that can develop make sense. He's just a kid who looks up to his brother, and now, with their real father figure gone, Sean is all he has left. That example you set for him is what he will become. Sometimes it'll be in very clear moments, like in episode 2, how Daniel talks in their grandparents' yard to Sean will differ depending on how Sean has been acting. Daniel's level of jealousy will be dependent on who Sean chooses to interact with. If he's mostly with Cassidy, he'll lash out at her. But if he's with Finn, and you lean more into the criminal shit, Daniel will latch onto that. There are tons of little details here and there that you might miss, like that one I mentioned where when you tell Daniel that Mushroom is in heaven with their dad, he'll bring that up again in episode 4. There are definitely details in the game I missed too, like how Daniel can apparently steal something from Brody's van, depending on how you played episode 1. And what's most impressive here, I have to keep stressing, is how they're able to make all of this possible with Daniel, but still at the game's core, have a central narrative around Daniel that develops naturally the same way, no matter what your choices are. Daniel starts the game off as your usual 9-year-old kid, but as the game goes on, we watch a kid suddenly forced to grow up too fast. He's confused and angry at first, but as time goes on, he starts to recognize that his brother is all he's got left in his journey. He has to stick with him through thick and thin, no matter what happens. So it makes sense for him to lash out the ways he does in episode 3. As that relationship with his brother comes under threat, he doesn't want to see it go away. And when it seems like it finally did, what does he do? He goes back to being that scared little kid, trying to find any semblance of a stable family he can, and it's what indoctrinates him into a cult. Finally, he thinks he found what he was looking for after all this time, but then Sean and his mother come back to threaten that. Even after all the rough edges, Daniel still tries to hold on to what he has now, because to him, this idea of a perfect family is all he has left. It's all he supposedly knew before with his dad and Sean, and now he has it again. But in one really awesome moment that unfortunately got drowned out by the technical issues and how many times I played it repeatedly just to discover alternate choices in this game, God, there really should have been an option to skip cutscenes whenever you wanted. Sean comes back and he tells him the reality. Families are not always perfect. Sometimes things can fall apart, even in spectacular fashion like it did for them. But telling him that what matters most, that love they have for each other, that love he has for his brother, that's what's most important. And this idealistic vision Daniel has had to varying degrees across the game finally shatters. He embraces his brother again, and while he's still a kid at heart, he's a kid with a new perspective on the world. One that is able to see the beauty in nature instead of being scared by it. One that can't understand the complexities of family dynamics, but can at least try to. One that is scared about what might happen next, but can take comfort in knowing that that's okay. Daniel starts the game being a regular little kid, and while he still ends it being a kid, he's a kid that's fully confident in himself, that finally understands his values and where they should be, that has a new lease on life and is able to move forward knowing that he still has a lot to learn. It's about as perfect of a coming-of-age story as you can get. And can you believe I haven't even talked about his powers or his gameplay at all yet? Let's stop neglecting that part of the game as much as I have. Daniel has telekinesis. How he got these powers? Fuck me, man, I don't know. It's Life is Strange. You gotta roll with it at this rate. But I feel more lenient about them this time around as far as the game not explaining them, where they came from, or how Daniel got them. And I think that lies in the simplicity this time. Life is Strange 1's time mechanics were pretty ambitious, but they also led to several story and narrative issues that resulted from not having a good, explainable, and simple understanding of how its time travel worked. That's not the case here. Daniel can move things with his mind, either with elegance or with force. Boom. Done. It's simple and it's to the point. That's all you need. Kind of genius too that they gave powers to such a young kid this time, because now, most any inconsistencies that could have come attached are explained by the fact that a 9-year-old boy is wielding powers he doesn't fully understand yet. The powers are used to a much better effect than the original game, and I'd say overall, it's the series' best use of supernatural powers to date. They keep it straightforward, they never make it more complicated than it needs to be, and it perfectly reflects your decision making around Daniel. The powers are usually a good indication of where Daniel's mind is when it comes to his confidence in his powers and how he uses them. Tell Daniel he needs to hide them more often than embrace them in episode 2, it can decide Chris's fate at the end of the episode. Sean and Daniel's bond starts to have emotional struggles. Daniel starts to show off to Sean his powers' exponential growth. In the final episode, how Sean acts around his brother will determine how he uses them. He can be extremely aggressive with them, killing people left and right, or he can be as passive with them as possible, only taking extreme measures when he has no other options left. And this decision making Sean has in regards to if and when Daniel uses his powers plays a role in your choices. So thankfully the Life is Strange wiki does have a very detailed breakdown about how all of this works in context to Life is Strange 2. And essentially how it boils down is that Daniel has all these trackers that are attached to him, and these trackers are dependent on your dialogue options, your choices, all of that. And these are broken down by things I want to call morality, brotherhood, confidence, and thievery. Every time you make a decision in this game, big or small, there's a chance for it to affect Daniel's score in these areas. For example, the first major choice in the game. If you confront Brett when he bullies Daniel, Daniel's brotherhood score will go up for Sean defending him, but his morality score will go down because he watched Sean pick a fight. Alternatively, if you confront Daniel instead on why he did this, his brotherhood score will be the only thing that immediately goes down from his brother accusing him of causing trouble. In the gas station, every time Sean steals something, Daniel's morality and brotherhood scores will drop, but his thievery score will go up, making him more likely to steal in episode 1. In episode 2, when he picks up the cougar that kills Mushroom, you can choose to not intervene and have him lose his morality and brotherhood score, but this will raise his confidence score, meaning he will be more likely to use his powers in key moments. The more intoxicated Sean gets at the camp in episode 3, the lower Daniel's morality score will get. Some choices only happen in extreme circumstances, like Sean shooting Lisbeth while Daniel is hurting her, only happens if Daniel's brotherhood score is exceptionally low. You remember how in Before the Storm, having Chloe start a relationship with Rachel was determined by if she was flirty with Rachel and opened up about her feelings? Yeah, imagine that mechanic on crack for 5 episodes, and you'd essentially get Sean and Daniel. And it's because of all of this that most of Life is Strange 2's choices feel so impactful, significantly more so than the last games or even the games after this. The game does tell you what the world you leave behind is like. The thing is, in this game, your world is your brother. Life is Strange 2 is the first game in the series where almost every choice feels like it has a real consequence, because most of them are going to determine how Daniel acts throughout the entire game. The kind of character you get out of Daniel is exactly the effort you put into him. Play Sean as more aggressive, Daniel will follow suit. Play Sean as a more sympathetic character, Daniel will be a lot nicer. Keep changing up how you play or what your morals are, Daniel will be realistically confused about what the right thing to do is. I think it's so cool that this game has 2 endings reflecting Sean's decisions for himself, and 2 that reflect his decisions towards Daniel. Having 2 endings in this game that are a direct result of how you choose to play it, and not having full control over their consequences, is a brilliant way to showcase how far Daniel has come depending on your actions. Obviously, if you play Sean more nobly, Daniel will back him up if he surrenders to the police, and if Sean is more aggressive and is still dead set on getting to Mexico by any means necessary, Daniel will also use his powers to reflect that feeling. But if you play Sean more noble and he decides he wants to keep running from his past, Daniel will take to heart what he learned from his brother and be a better man, stay behind, and let his brother live a free life in Puerto Lobos. But if Sean spends the game as a total criminal and decides it's finally time at the end to pay for his sins, Daniel will refuse to accept that and keep going, resulting in the worst consequence of his life, getting his own brother killed. It makes your decisions feel so heavy because when you watch that ending montage for each episode, you know that that is the ending you deserve to get, because that is exactly how you treated Daniel. I'm so dumbfounded to be giving this much praise to a Life is Strange game, but look, I told you guys from the very start, if there would be something I like about these games, or even really, really like, I would have no qualms being honest about it. And if I'm being honest, moving forward, I don't think there's going to be much guilty pleasure when I reflect back on Life is Strange 2. There's always this odd element here and there I appreciate about these games, but for this game? Hell no. There's no guilty pleasure here, no weird thing I like, nothing like that. I realize this dynamic in these games has been done to death. Lee and Clementine, Joel and Ellie, Kratos and Atreus. If you can do it well, it's an easy character duo to make and get a ton of praise for. But damn it, this is one of the good ones. Dontnod did an unbelievably incredible job with these two. I never expected in 1,000 years to say something like this in any of my Life is Strange videos, but I think they may have done this better than Lee and Clementine. Now, I think those two characters are better all things considered, but the fact of the matter is that even Lee and Clementine's relationship in that first game doesn't go nearly as in-depth as Sean and Daniel's does in this game, from a gameplay standpoint anyways. Just like when I first played The Walking Dead all those years ago, and thought about how Clementine would perceive my decisions, every waking moment I spent playing Life is Strange 2, I was always asking myself, even when he wasn't around, what kind of example do I want to set for Daniel? What do I have to do in order to ensure that he knows how to use his powers for good? What do I have to do in order to give him a good moral standing? What do I have to do in order to be a good brother for him, or even a father figure if I need to? What do I have to do to guarantee that Daniel is the best person he can be? Sean and Daniel's character and relationship is what makes this game for me. It's what kept me playing, it's what kept me around, it's what got me excited to experience it and play through it over again. Even through the repetition of not skipping cutscenes. I'm sorry, I know I keep bringing that up, but man, that just really annoys me. I made this series with the goal of finding what brings me back to these games, why I keep playing them and talking about them, and what my odd fascination with them is. Sean and Daniel's brotherhood isn't oddly fascinating, it's truly fascinating. So, with all of that said, is there some kind of odd fascination I have with this game? Yes, there is. Because while I was enamored with Sean and Daniel, watching their relationship grow and develop, watching my choices have real consequences for their coming-of-age stories, there was always this little voice in the back of my mind constantly ringing off while I was playing this, where I just kept playing and I kept wondering and kept thinking, why wasn't the rest of the game like this?
I love you. No matter what happens. You hear me?
Yeah. I love you too.
I didn't know what to expect going into Life is Strange 2. There was a small part of me that admittedly thought people were overhyping this game. Like, there's no way people think this highly of a Life is Strange game, right? But I still wanted to keep myself open to the chance. After all, I liked Life is Strange 1 more after replaying it, for as mediocre as I think that game is. And the longer I make these videos, the more genuine respect I develop for that game I previously never thought I would ever have. In some areas, I won't lie to you guys, I felt mostly indifferent to Life is Strange 2. Let's factor out Sean and Daniel for a second. Life is Strange 2 is a game that I would have thought deserved a lot of respect, just on the fact that it's such a drastic improvement over the first game. Dontnod dialed back the over-the-top dialogue to make something much more straightforward and serious. The graphics, art direction, and presentation have gotten a much-needed facelift. The voice direction and voice acting has considerably improved with very few, if any, performances I call mediocre or outright bad. But it still falls into the same trappings as the previous games and how it's delivered at times. The pacing is all over the place, causing long lulls in the game where nothing happens at all, followed by several things happening at once, with no room to sprinkle its narrative out further. The road trip nature of the story can cause several pacing issues, lots of lulls where not a lot happens, followed by moments where everything happens at once. The inherent style of the narrative this time may allow for great supporting characters that are supplementary, but fails in the times the game tries delivering a supporting cast, when it seems like the game is that quick to forget about a decent bit of them after every episode. A metric ton of characters get sidelined at best, or don't get enough time to fully develop at worst. There are times where the dialogue can be equally as cringe as the last two games, not nearly as often, but it still happens. The art direction is fine enough, but is a bit of a letdown compared to the game prior. Some parts of the game, especially episode 3, get way too overdramatic and wrapped up in the moment that it can be hard to take as seriously as the developers probably intended. And this is in line with the game's themes and politics, which, while unfortunately an improved and accurate portrayal of what this country becomes, gets too lost at times in directly delivering its message at the cost of seamlessly weaving it into the story to make for a narrative that could have been truly compelling. Some of the gameplay segments can be annoying to get through, in the sense that some of them are counterintuitive to Life is Strange's inherent design that has you look over every single detail it has to offer, and then at other times being a missed opportunity to go even further with how your decision making can affect the narrative itself. And some of the gameplay design choices in general can make it all that much more disappointing when there are certain sections that still play out the same way no matter what, and then there are others that give you so much variety in what can possibly happen within a fixed narrative. But when Life is Strange 2 gets it right, it really gets it right. The characters that are more supplementary are some of the best supporting cast we've had in these games. Most of the choices have significantly more weight and narrative implication compared to before. The soundtrack, while still having that issue of blending into the game and not sticking out, is still a great and relaxed collection of pieces that perfectly capture the tone the game is going for. But what this game gets right the most is Sean and Daniel. Their story, their journey, their conclusion is what carries this entire game, even through its worst aspects. And that's a little scary to think about in context, because if this dynamic falls apart, then the entire game falls apart. But not once did it ever come close to that. Dontnod knew that this was the one thing they had to get extremely right, and by God, they did it. Because even through this game's many flaws, and some of them can be really significant flaws, I was still hooked and I wanted to keep playing because I wanted to see the new and intriguing ways that Sean and Daniel's story and relationship could potentially develop over the course of this game, how versatile Sean as a character could become, and how it would directly or indirectly affect how versatile Daniel could become, is something I was still endlessly impressed by the more I played through the game. The different opportunities for dialogue, interactions, decisions, all of it. I never got tired of seeing them and thinking through the consequences of them. This game doesn't lie. Your choices will affect the world around you. And when you recognize that your world in this game is Daniel, it makes you that much more mindful of how you play Sean. What you get out of these two is exactly the kind of effort you put into them. And their stories always conclude impressively with 4 different endings, because even if you may not like the results, you know it's the exact one you deserve to get. You know that the importance of Sean's decision in this moment hinges not just on you, but on Daniel and how you chose to raise him in this game. It's an eye for detail that's a far cry from what we got in previous games, and it all makes for a choice-driven game where it truly feels like your choices have real consequences. For me to say that about any Life is Strange game is a massive feat, but for Dontnod to handle it so impressively well in Life is Strange 2, I don't know if I can sing enough praises. Which is why it's all the more frustrating that Dontnod couldn't take this a step further, even with the extra time they had in between making these episodes. Have this level of detail for all of the characters. Have these moral dilemmas happen in a central cast of characters instead of only 2. Find new and unique ways to discover how Sean's actions reflect on the world around him, and how Daniel's actions can have subsequent actions. Allow for that same level of dynamic storytelling across the rest of the game, and I think we could have gotten something truly special here like that first Walking Dead game is, or even other choice-driven games in this genre that are considered gold standards. But as it is here, while Sean and Daniel's journey blew my mind with how in-depth and 3-dimensional it was, I can't say in confidence the game as a whole truly blew me away. Without this element, I would tell you that Life is Strange 2 was an average and even at times mid-game with pacing problems, rushed characters, heavy-handed messaging, and I'd probably say you could skip it too. But when you factor in this game's main characters, how fully realized they are, and how exceptionally well they carry the game even through its worst moments, in its own bizarre way, you can argue it does take a special game to accomplish that. When you have a character study that is this good, a choice-driven core narrative that is this good, and a coming-of-age story that is this good, it drowns out those bad moments. Because I know that every waking moment of this game is in service to developing 2 of the best video game characters I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Sean's development is great, Daniel's development is great, Life is Strange 2 is great. Please go out and play this. It may not be a phenomenal game, but it's a phenomenal effort from Dontnod. The first episode is free on all platforms. Give it a shot and see if it's something you're into. And if you like it, go buy the rest of the season. Even through its low points, I can promise you it is worth playing. So I can already hear it now. Do I now think Life is Strange 2 is the best game in the series? I mean, I think I know the answer to that, but I still gotta give these games a fair shot. I gave the first game a fair chance when I replayed that, and it turned out to be better than I remembered, even if it is still at best a guilty pleasure game of mine. Like, the possibility does exist. Like, there is a chance I could end up liking True Colors more or Double Exposure more. That being said, this is gonna be a very high bar to surpass here. If you can actually see it and the light's not reflecting on this. I need to get a better lighting situation here. I hate to bring up The Walking Dead over and over again in these videos, but truly I have not felt this way about a narrative adventure game since that first Walking Dead game. Now, do I think Life is Strange 2 surpasses that game? Absolutely not. Walking Dead, that game's very important to me. I don't think anything is going to be beating that game anytime soon. Life is Strange 2 stumbles at times, and it can even stumble pretty badly at times, but what it has at its core here is another example to set for how to create these types of character bonds and archetypes in a video game. I think generally speaking, if it was more focused and balanced like I've been talking about throughout this video, it very well could have been one of my favorites. Like, if the story was more streamlined, it had more central supporting characters, and if it wasn't afraid to let its powerful moments sit and let them sink in instead of telling you how to feel about them, I really think this could have been one of my favorites. And I don't know, maybe with enough time, this will become one of my favorites. I mean, if I can have as much appreciation for the first Life is Strange game as I do now, anything's possible. Life is Strange 2 is a really good time, and you're in for one hell of a character-driven story if you go out and play it. Of course, if you're not into these point-and-click narrative adventure games, it's not going to change your mind at all. But if you are into this genre like I am, you definitely owe it to yourself to at least try this game out. It is definitely worth it. Okay, so on that note, I was going to end the video a bit more comedic and, you know, talk about the fact like, oh, I actually liked a Life is Strange game. I guess I'm a Life is Strange fan now, and I mean, I guess that is technically true now too. Like, at this point, there are more Life is Strange games that I do at least like than I dislike, so I guess I can call myself a fan now. Yay. I don't know what to do here. But on that note, I'm gonna kind of ad-lib this part. This part isn't really scripted, because like I said, I was going to have a more detailed and like goofy ending here, but I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys. I'm getting a little Life is Stranged out. I really need to talk about something new. I was preemptively working on a video for True Colors, and I do at least want to have a rough draft of that script ready, but I'm gonna be honest, I am starting to feel a little burnout. I think I need to talk about something new here. What exactly that's gonna be, I don't know just yet. I think I have an idea of what I want to talk about for my next video, but we'll just have to wait and see if it plays out like I want it to. But yeah, on that note, I think I'm gonna end it more on a direct personal note. Thank you guys for your patience for this video. I really wanted to make sure I was taking my time with it, covering as many bases as I could. There's still, like the first game, there's still probably things I did miss and I do still want to talk about, but I have spent so much time on Life is Strange 2 the past few months, for my own mental sanity, I have to move on and I need to play something different. All of that said, if you made it this far, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for your patience here. I hope this video was everything you guys were hoping and expecting it to be. I did have a little bit of pressure going into this because I really wanted to make sure this video was like as perfect as it could possibly be, because, you know, people were asking for this one. They were almost begging me to do this one. And I can only hope that by the end of it, I've given you guys the answers that you were hoping for, or at the very least, just made a very entertaining video in the process. But if you like these kind of things, make sure you subscribe. Again, I don't know what's going to be coming next. I think these longer analysis videos are going to be continuously happening for this channel. I think I might try to do something a little bit smaller scale for the next video because, like, I love making these videos, but they take a lot of time to make, and I know you guys have had the patience of gods. Like, you guys have been really patient, and I'm super, super, super appreciative of that. But I also, if I can help it, I really don't want to keep you guys waiting for too long for the next video. So I'm thinking I might do something a little more small scale while I'm working on True Colors. But we'll just have to wait and see. It kind of depends on if what I'm working on right now goes how I want it to. Not going to say what it is just yet. I kind of have a lot of ideas floating around. There's some older ideas I want to eventually revisit, but I think I'm going to save all of that for like an update video or something. But yeah, just on that note, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for 1,000 subscribers. I genuinely, at the beginning of the year, I never thought that was a threshold I was ever going to surpass. Like, I really, truly, like, I keep saying a lot, but I did not expect these Life is Strange videos to been as big as they are so far. And the fact that you guys are watching this, that you're, like, enjoying them, you're commenting, that we got, like, this small community going on, like, it truly does mean the world to me. I'm probably gonna be saying it a lot for these videos here, but it truly means the world to me. Just even for this brief moment, being able to have some small community that I can talk with and that enjoys watching my content, like, it really means more than you can imagine. But I think we're gonna stop it there so that I don't keep on rambling. I'm gonna close things out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys hopefully sooner rather than later. Bye. What was I doing here? Like, yeah, I'm just gonna end it here. I'll see you guys later.